Well, hello, good afternoon, good evening, and all that kind of stuff. What day is it? It's Thursday, isn't it? Oh, gosh, I'm grotty. This is going to be a special grotty edition of Paul English Live. But, of course, even though it's grotty, this means that it's just way, way ahead of all the non-grotty sort of shows. This is episode 79. What's the date? 6th of March, 2025. Welcome to the show. And although we're not going to be focusing on it exclusively this evening, I'm hoping that a little goodly chunk of the show we're going to talk about the Crusades. You remember those? I don't. And the Crusaders. And the Crusaders, of course, are going to be joining me in the studio. I do like a good mute button, don't you? Mutus and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry for sounding so grotty. I was grotty actually a couple of months ago. I got grotty from about December the 20th through to mid-January. That was my first grotty period, a bit like a postmodernist period for a painter. And of course then everything was just marvellous. But around about a week back, just over a week ago, I picked up something or other. And I've just been having a lot of fun, really. Showed up on Ria Bow's show this Sunday. Quite grotty then. Still a bit grotty. It's taking quite a bit of time to shake off. So I know these sorts of things possibly don't irritate you, but they bloody well irritate me when they're going on. And I can't believe I've had two. It's a bit like that proverbial bus situation. I hadn't had any for about 5 years. Now they're rolling up all the time. So something strange going on. I'm going to blame the fog. Not that we get much fog down here, actually. You'd think we would. Although yesterday we did. I just wanted to automatically contradict myself right at the beginning of the show. We had your English traditional pea super. It really was. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Actually, that's a bit of a lie, but vision was down to about 10 yards. It was that tight was the fog. I haven't seen one for a long time. It was pretty weird, really. So I was driving very slowly, trying to avoid all the other cars that were driving much, much quicker than me because I'm very, very careful. So that made for an interesting evening, last night's evenings of fog, coughing and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, enough about me. Welcome everyone to the show. Loosely the theme of today's show is we're going to talk a bit about the Crusades. Not necessarily completely historically in a totally precise and accurate type of way, not that we're seeking to make any errors, but I just wanted to talk about a book I've been reading recently and to possibly mention a few, possibly, hopefully more than a few, depending on how well my brain's going to work this evening, salient facts from it. Very surprising things, actually. They were to me. But before we get into all that, let me introduce to you the crew, or the Crusaders, maybe for tonight, although it's a little bit awkward and a very thin connection. Anyway, over across the water on the other side of the world, almost, nearly, or the other side of the flat plain, depending on what you like, Patrick in Wisconsin. Good evening, or good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Yeah, good evening, Paul. I'm doing
I'll tell you what, we cannot hear you because I've got you all on mute. So let me do that again. Are you ready? Good afternoon. How are you?
Good evening, Paul. I'm doing quite well. How about yourself? Besides the whatever you've got there.
Apart from terrible. The lurgy, the cough. Yeah, I actually don't feel that bad. It's just sort of, I don't sort of feel, but wasn't I talking to you earlier about, I was thinking about recording, my voice, because I'm very vain, for these, to get a voice profile for these AI robots and all that kind of stuff. Well, I can't record it right now, otherwise everything I do will just be read out literally by this snotty Englishman, which of course is not really what anybody wants. But no, I'm not too bad. I've got lashings of water and lashings of lashings of tissues, just in case I have to really have a good English nasal pop. And my finger's not far from the mute button. But other than that, I'm not too bad. How are you? You chugging along okay?
Yeah, I'm chugging along okay. We got a bunch of snow a couple days ago, and it's gradually melting, but it was a pain to get it all plowed up and out, get out and about. One of our neighbors had the unfortunate accident to fall into the ditch and hit a tree. And I hope they're okay. I think they're okay. It didn't look too bad, but you never know with people. It looked like they walked out of it alive. So
yes,
yeah, you got to be careful out there when it gets icy.
Is that a technical term, Patrick? A bunch of snow? Is that
a bunch of snow? Yep, a bunch is.
Yep. Is it a bunch? Is it a bunch, Eric? Eric, is it a bunch? I don't know whether it's a bunch or not. Is it a bunch?
I don't know. I've never heard of a bunch of snow, but I remember many years ago, and I'm going back to when I was about 5, my parents went into a supermarket that was a Canadian supermarket that sold Canadian goods. It didn't last very long in this country. And they picked up a sauce bottle, and the instructions said, put a dollop of sauce on your meal. And they thought that was very amusing. Put a dollop of sauce on your meal.
Yeah, we know what a dollop is, don't we? We know what a dollop is. Yeah, we like dollops.
A dollop of clotted cream.
Yeah, dollop.
Yeah. I thought it may be an Americanism. I always remember isn't there a clip in sort of one of these Monty Python documentaries? Because what's his name? Terry Gilliam was the American. They always used to refer to him and be very sort of patronising, but very sort of endearing and funny way.
Around here, he's Minnesotan.
Oh, this explains it. This explains it because they said they were flying over the Great Lakes, I think. All of them. Yeah. And Terry Gilliam looks out of the window and says, look down there, there's a great bunch of water. So it's obviously a Wisconsinism, this thing about bunches of snow and bunches of water or bunches of lakes. Is that right?
You know, this whole area used to be called New France before it was America. So a new Frenchism, I don't know what you would call it, but yeah, bunches of grapes, bunches of apples.
Yeah.
Snow. It's a heavy snow you can make a snowman with.
It's a bit like the woman that rushed into a police station. She said, help, I've just been graped. And the bloke said, been graped? He said, surely, madam, you mean raped? She said, no, there's a bunch of them. Sorry.
And that after only 8 minutes of broadcasting. Tremendous. That's fantastic. I see that Paul's with us, although he might only be there in graphic representation only. Paul, are you there? Are you communicative or are you not? Let's listen.
I'm actually here.
Hey, hi, there you are. You're kind of quiet as well. You're kind of quiet at the moment. You're a little quiet there.
I'll definitely have to fix that.
Yeah, I can possibly fix it. Don't worry. We've got volume controls in England as well, you know. We have got them. Oh. I think we do.
Turn his amp up to 11.
You're very loud. Just don't you adjust anything. Just stay there. Go on, keep talking.
I'm going to...
yeah, you're there now. I've got you. Don't worry. Well, you're cool. We got you. Yeah, I had you really cranked down. I don't know why. Your mic settings were very low at my end, so my fault. There you go. But at least we got to talk about microphones for a few seconds, didn't we? Which is always a good thing.
But why? But why? Why? Oh, I know. It was probably like one of the other shows. I had a mic open or a line open, and there was like an obnoxious noise, and you went in there and attenuated me.
I think it was from last week, actually. You were bloody loud, but I never say things like bloody loud on the radio, and except then, when I have to describe it as bloody loud, so that's really what it was. But anyway, how are you? How's the ice going? How's the guttering bearing up? What's going on? We want to know. We're very keen to know Paul's fight against the guttering.
The ice has yet to succumb to gravity. I'm just saying. It
really?
It has yet to give into gravity. It's still up there.
It's a big bunch of ice, is it? That's what it'll be. It's a big
bunch of ice. And I can say that because I'm from Minnesota and I did go through Wisconsin on my way to New York. So, you know, I had a few hours to pick up the lingo on my way through the state, you know.
It's good. I don't mind bunch. That's good. And I know we've all spoken here, but a quick, more than a quick, actually, a good shout out to everybody in Rumble. Welcome, Rumblers. So just to let you know, you listen here to Paul English Live on WBN. 3 to 4. We're here every Thursday, 3 o'clock US Eastern, 8 o'clock in the UK for a couple of hours. And our main home for chat, whilst we're rolling out over the radio airwaves, is on Rumble. If you feel as though you have to type things, and probably if you don't feel it now, you will do at some point soon in your life. It just comes upon all of us. Head on over to paulenglishlive.com and click the Rumble link. It'll bring you into the Rumble channel, and you can join all the other Rumble grumblers there who are always making pithy and rather withering comments every week. So shout out to all of you. I'm not going to do it all by name, but that's great to see you all here this weekend. And this week, in fact, actually today. Oh, God. And today's picture image. Now, if you're on radio, you haven't seen the image, but for my sins, I run around and try and pick up a good image for the week. And I just want to let you know who that is in today's picture. It is, in fact, of course, Richard the Lionheart. Sorry. He also had a very bad cough. And Richard the Lionheart, as painted by the great American illustrator. Look at how I offer out peaceful donations here. N.C. Wyeth, who I've used for other illustrations in the past. And if you're not familiar with the illustrations of N.C. Wyeth, spelt W-Y-E-T-H, you should be. If you like, even if you don't like good illustrations, you will if you look at his. The fantastic book illustrator from about 100 years ago, actually. Maybe a little bit older than that, maybe a little bit younger than that. He had a long career anyway. Did a great illustrated version of Treasure Island. And this, I think, is his illustrated version. It's a book called The Crusades. And this is, of course, Mr. Lionheart out in the desert about to chop someone's head off, which he did quite regularly. So there we go. How about that? Now, before we sort of jump on... Yeah, who said that? Who said that?
Nice guy, chopping people's heads off and stuff.
Well, he wasn't alone. Head chopping off was the order of the day, no matter what sword you were on, or even side you were on, no matter what side of the sword you were on, even. So, a lot of chopping off of heads and propelling of them through the air using catapults. All of that stuff's absolutely true. I'm assuming most of you here, maybe you haven't, but certainly many of the will have seen the Lord of the Rings trilogies from, good grief, 25 years ago now. Can't believe this. And you will have probably remember that certain battle sequences where the city, is it Minas Tirith? I'm not a nerd with all this stuff. I can just remember a few things, right? Is under siege, and heads are being fired into the inner city. Heads chopped off of their soldiers who obviously have lost their lives and are in the process of losing their heads as well. So this is that's based on historical precedent. Certainly the Crusaders and the Saracens, or the Moors, or the Muslims, however you want to refer to them, they all indulged in a bit of head throwing. So probably the origins of the shot put. I don't know, but they were grisly times anyway. But before I even sort of shoot onto that, just as an open question to all of you, don't really mind, do you know anything much at all about the Crusades?
It's been a while.
It's not a trick question at all. I'm just trying to find out, what.
Well, Robin Hood. Most people know about Robin Hood. So
they do.
That time period.
Yeah.
What we're talking about.
You got any knowledge of it, Eric?
None whatsoever. Absolutely.
Nope.
Draws a blank. At school, we didn't cover that. We just covered the kings and queens and, and I was so bored at history. I love history now, but when I was at school, I actually got one of my old school books. I found one a couple of years ago, and I actually repeated. We used to have to copy down what the teacher had written on the blackboard. And I'd actually copied it down 3 times. I didn't realise it. I was so bored. So asleep. Just used to just write, and it just went in one ear and out the other, unfortunately. Until a
Which ear did it go in first, though? Which ear do you think it went in first? The right ear? Sorry, I'm always interested in the direction flow. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I absorbed a lot of history stuff in the background without really paying attention to it. I always remember having a book about, I think it was the English Civil War, or it was about Charles I and all that kind of stuff, And I opened them, they were illustrated with illustrations from the day, and there was a picture of someone pointing an accusating finger at somebody else. And it looked quite good, apart from the fact that some other schoolboy had put a speech bubble in there. And the speech bubble caused me to become very distracted because what was coming out of the mouth of the man with the pointing his finger it just said, because one doesn't forget things like this, chop his balls off. And I think that history book was probably ruined. Yeah, that was my response at the back of the history lesson. Mr. Simmons was not well pleased. What are you laughing at there, boy? Yeah, sorry, sir, nothing much. No, it's fine. Absolutely nothing. Please, go on, sir. I'm fascinated. So, yeah, chop his balls off. Now, actually, testicles are going to come up a little bit later, actually, in an amazing clip that I've got for you. So bear that in mind. It's all relevant. So, you know about Robin Hood, Patrick? Which you might do, I suppose. And we know about that period, you know. I mean, the bit that I want to talk about with regards to this book, which is God's Battalions by Rodney Stark. And if you want a good book to read, everybody out there, I think I might have mentioned this last week. I've finished just about the bulk of it, and I couldn't be bothered to sort of wait another week. Because this is not meant to be a sort of precise book review. It's more like a kind of just a kind of blast through it, and I wanted to sort of mention certain points. It's a book, Eric, for you, because 10 days ago, I would say that my knowledge of this period of history or the meaning of it and all that kind of stuff was at the same level that yours is at right now, which is the very reason why I've been sort of jumping on the book and wanted to actually have a look at it and get to grips with it. And what I will say about it in its in a positive way, because I don't have enough information to be hypercritical about it, which is really rather nice, you know. Yeah, I hate it when he's sort of pernickety about things, is the author, Rodney Stark, who I did go off and try and find because I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I've got to get him on the show, right? Of course, he's not alive. He actually wasn't in the Crusades. He's not that old. He died just a few years ago, actually. American author, which... and he's written quite a few books about this period and formations of church systems and things like this. Not necessarily a religious man himself, from the little bit I've been able to glean about him so far. But he says in the foreword that he's written this for the layman. And I think you can't write books better than that. I'm quite serious about this. I think books that are written for the layman are always the ones that I've tended to remember the most. They're the ones that are the easiest to get to grips with. And he does a brilliant job of laying out a lot of key facts about this event. And I'm just talking about the first one that happened under Pope Urban. Funny name that. I always thought it was odd. Urban. Pope Urban. The second, was it? Patrick would know better than me. I don't have a big popometer. Have you got a popometer, Eric? Have you got one?
I don't.
Well, actually, I did have one, but it fell off. So the wheels fell off. So, I you know.
No, you've lost your popometer.
Where's the popometer gone?
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Never been right since, actually, since we popometer. The wheels fell off, you know. But
well, I think Fockham Hall should get those back into production, the popometers. Yes. They'd be highly popular at Christmas, wouldn't they? I don't know. Maybe they would.
Fun for all the family. Well, actually, no, actually, what I've got for next Christmas is the Observer's Book of Venereal Diseases. That's a really good one for Christmas mealtime, isn't it? Fun for all the family, you know. Sorry.
Well, I'd have thought it's pretty easy to sort of observe. I don't want to observe that sort of thing. Why would I want to observe it, Eric? This is the main problem.
Good Lord, Eric.
Good
Bloody hell.
Good grief, man.
Here.
Have I transmitted the disease?
Lord,
Who's got the... Am I transmitting coughs everywhere?
And I don't know, the mental picture that it just tightened my throat. Just oh, I can't believe you just said that. Oh, good grief.
Actually, okay. I've got a good cure for both your colds. If you both got a cold, I may have said it before, but
I didn't have one before you said that.
Ah, well,
I'm just going on record.
It comes from America.
Have one before you said that.
After the flu thingamabob in 1918, or if you believe it or not, I don't know. But anyway, the American government put out a tender for any company that could find a cure for the flu. And Arm & Hammer won it. And they came up with an idea, because Arm & Hammer are the people that do the toothpaste and the bicarbonate of soda, where you put half, a very, very stingy half of a teaspoonful of water in a beaker, and then put half a teaspoonful of baking soda or bicarbonate soda in it, and drink that every 2 hours, the first signs you get a cold. And then next day, every 4 hours, and then on the third day, once in the morning and once in the evening. And apparently it turns your body from acid to alkaline, and a cold cannot survive in an alkaline environment. And people took it up. It was fantastic. This was in the early 20s. And suddenly Big Pharma went and put a squash on it. And nobody's heard of it.
Big Pharma went apoplectic.
And there's medical papers on this as well. If you want to look them up, they're actually online. There's medical papers. I did medical research into it. And it was very good. So there we are.
Eric, that when I get a cold like that, I take Alka-Seltzer, and that seems to do quite well. And I suppose that's where you get the alkaline from in that.
Hey, I like that. I like that. My grandma used to give me an Alka-Seltzer or Andrews, which is a similar sort of liver salts, as a treat on a Sunday. We were very exciting when I was young. But I loved it because the bubbles used to go up your nose. You know that? Do you remember?
Yeah.
You have it's great. Very exciting when you're about 5. Ooh, I've got bubbles up my nose.
Yes. But my uncle had the best cure. He'd always advise, he said, if you got a cold, you should go straight to bed with a hot woman. And I think it's quite a good idea, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Although you may remember a few weeks ago, I played those clips of all those British types telling you their wonderfully wacky and very interesting cures for a cold. I have, of course, I've had a sock. Yeah, I've got an old sock around my neck,
the safety
secured in place with a clothes peg. I don't know what good it's doing, but it's keeping everybody away from me. I can tell you that. So I've got quite a bit of peace and quiet. It's not too bad. Yeah,
smell it from here.
It's all right.
That's very similar to the whole thing, like garlic necklace. That, keeps vampires and everybody else, away. But Patrick, question for you. You remember in the 70s, 80s, I don't know how old you are, but in the 70s and the 80s, the Alka-Seltzer came out with an Alka-Seltzer plus cold and flu.
Yeah.
And you could drop a couple of those tablets in a glass of water and drink it down, and it would literally eliminate your cold much, much sooner than one would normally expect. You know what? I have not seen that in forever.
I think, they still have it. I've used it. Back
I
when I was sick a few months ago.
Obviously, I'm not looking in the right place, but that just struck me. With Eric's thing about the Alka-Seltzer and the baking soda and all that.
Oh, and then
you learn something new every day.
Their slogan was "Plop plop fizz fizz." Oh, what a relief!
Oh, what a relief it is!
Oh, I like that. Let's bring back plop plop fizz fizz. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's good. What were we talking about?
Do you remember? Was it Mackerson? No, was it? What was that drink, Paul? Looks good, tastes good. By golly, it does you good. What was it?
It was Mackerson. Yeah, it was a stout.
Mackerson.
It was the stout competitor to Guinness, wasn't it?
That's right. And what happened is every night this fellow would come on the television and say, "Looks good, tastes good, and certainly does you good." And then one evening, he said, "Looks good, tastes good." Looks straight into the screen and says, "Yeah, that's right," because he knew everybody would say, "Does you good?" That was a very clever piece of advertising. Yeah,
looks good, tastes good, and by golly, it does you good. Yeah,
that's it. Yes.
Well, of course, it's prescribed for pregnant women, isn't it?
Is it?
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but Guinness is. It's okay for. If you get Guinness, anything simply because of the iron content. I mean, I don't know how they brew it these days, but it was to do with the iron content in stout.
The malt in it is good for you. They used to give malt syrup as kind of a vitamin-rich elixir. So I heard.
That's probably why most of the babies up north are born drunk, I suppose. Slightly drunk northern babies.
Well, it doesn't need to be fermented. It's just straight malt syrup.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
So the popes, all right? I'm trying to think of the popes, the particular ones that would have started. You said Urban, one of the Urbans.
Let me read you this opening paragraph from the introduction to the book. It just sets the tone for a few things. He just says this. This is just to give you an idea of the dates. So this is just 30 years after the Battle of Hastings, right? Just under 1095. It says this. On November the 27th, 1095, Pope Urban II, U-R-B-A-N, of course he wasn't born that, I forgot, he was a Frenchman actually, he was French, or a French cleric or whatever. His name pops up somewhere on later on in the text, but we don't need to remember that right now because there's not going to be an exam. Mounted a platform set up in a meadow outside the French city of Clermont, surrounded in all directions by an immense crowd. A vigorous man of 53, Urban was blessed with an unusually powerful and expressive voice that made it possible for him to be heard at a great distance. On this memorable occasion, addressing a multitude that included poor peasants as well as nobility and clergy, the Pope gave a speech that changed history. Urban had arranged the gathering in response to a letter from Alexius Comnenus, Emperor of Byzantium, who had written from his embattled capital of Constantinople, or is it Istanbul, to the Count of Flanders, requesting that he and his fellow Christians send forces to help the Byzantines repel the Seljuk Turks, recent converts to Islam who had invaded the Middle East, captured Jerusalem, and driven to within 100 miles of Constantinople. In his letter, the emperor detailed gruesome tortures of Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land and vile desecrations of churches, altars, and baptismal fonts. Should Constantinople fall to the Turks, not only would thousands more Christians be murdered, tortured, and raped, but also the most holy relics of the Saviour, gathered over the centuries, would be lost. Therefore, in the name of God, we implore you to bring this city all the faithful soldiers of Christ. In your coming, you will find your reward in heaven, and if you do not come, God will condemn you. So pretty clear. And that's how the book starts. And this speech was colossally successful. And he goes on to explain why it was colossally successful. And a lot of the background as to why they couldn't, for example, raise a crusade, I think, round about 850 AD, because there was just as much reason to do it then. The dates being that Muhammad, having arrived in the world, I think, early 600s, within the next 180 years, by the late 780s, they had taken over vast swathes of formerly Christian towns, cities, and coastline all around the Mediterranean, and murdered a considerable number of Christian people.
Charlemagne
along the way. Charlemagne, yeah. And there's an immense battle, the Battle of Tours, which took place, I think, about 740 AD. This is the one in which Charles Martel basically defeated a colossal Islamic army, pretty big. Now, by colossal, I think it was colossal by their times, but it's still pretty big. It's something like 25 to 30,000. At the Battle of Tours, nobody knows exactly where it is, but it was 150 miles south of Paris. That's how far they got in. 150 miles south of Paris. Yeah. And one of the comments was that had he not won that battle, right now we wouldn't be speaking English. We probably would be speaking Arabic or something else. And America would have not been called America, it would have been called the United States of Arabia or something like that. I don't know what it would have been called. Yeah, highly likely. Highly likely. And so these are pivotal events, which of course we do take for granted because you're just born into the world that you're born into and you find out how it works later on, don't you? But yeah, that's how the book starts. And it's full of spectacular facts and details. For example, let me give you one. A thing that really struck me. One of the reasons why the previous ones hadn't been successful, the previous sort of appeals to the knightly class to get on their horses and go down there, was that there was never really any promise of booty, and they needed it. And so it wasn't there. So they didn't think that they could really drum up support. But this one was different. There were no promises of booty either, but it worked. And it worked because of the ongoing battles that they were all now aware of that had been happening, particularly with the Moors, i.e. the Moroccans, that's how they get their name, just like from Morocco, working their way into Spain. And they were defeated by the Franks in northern Spain, and much of the Franks moved over to, I guess, what is kind of northern Portugal, really, as an enclave to see that out. But many of them went down, and of all the knightly class, and France in this case supplied the bulk of this first crusade, because they're many. I think they're reckoned to be nearly 8, I think, according to those things you sent over to me a bit earlier, Patrick. Of all the knights that were available, just 15% went. 15%. And the reason it was just 15%, and they were all really on for it, and they were all going without the idea of actually picking up loads of booty. Now, towards the Middle Crusades, they did start to pick up booty because it was around, because of these cities that they went into, but that's another story. The cost of sending one knight down there was so considerable that many of these families who had several sons that were knights and would send them all, they were completely devoted to the defense of Christendom. This is really what inspired them. They weren't just sort of some colonialist thugs at all. The cost was through the roof. So one of the things, there's a very interesting bit where he's going through the economics of it all, about what you would need. And a knight would need at least 3 horses, at least 3. There's the battle horse, and they were big with the European battle horses because we had farriers. They'd been fitted with shoes. And not that the shoes made the horses big, but it made the horses much more formidable in terms of the sort of ground that they could fight on and do on and all this kind of stuff. And they were bigger than the Arabian horses that they were about to encounter. So you have to have at least 1 battle horse. And if you're fortunate, you'd have 2, because the first one's probably going to get shot out from underneath you at some point. And you need 2 other horses to carry your armor and all your other supplies. Then you need servants to look after the horses and feed them along the way. Then you need your money, which at the time was metal coin, which was heavy. And so you'd go down in groups of knights, and one of the little groupings would be the treasurer, as it were, with a big casket, and that needed guards against it as well. So you start to tot up all the logistics, and then you go, how fast are we going to be able to get down there? Oh, that'll be walking pace. So you've got to plan for all of that, and it's 2,500 miles away. So you'd have to say that anybody that took that was determined to the nth degree. And one of the really amazing statistics of the first one, again, is that 60,000 infantry and knights set off. There were way more than that, but the main body of 60,000 set off. And by the time they got down to into that territory, it may even, I think it's probably Jerusalem, but it's Antioch, I think, to get as far as that.
Syria
only
had
15,000 had made it. 45,000 of them died before they even got to the first battle. I mean, that's serious. And why did they die? Well, they died from disease along the way. Some died from starvation. Many died from fighting, not with one another. This would be mad, right? Although that did kind of happen as well. But as you've got this large body of armed men building up from all these different sort of trails and then moving through Romania and Hungary, I think particularly, the kings of Romania and Hungary were naturally very anxious. When you don't think about these things until they're laid out in front of you on a sheet of paper, you start thinking about it. And they were very anxious because tens of thousands of armed blokes with swords who were extremely proficient at killing. This has to be borne in mind, right? These were knights. They were trained from an early age to just fight all the time, and they were up for it all the time. That was their entire life. And they were rightly concerned. So there were a lot of battles along the way, and obviously thousands killed. Some horrific things between forces that really should have been unified, but everybody's protecting their own stuff, which is another thing that happens as well. So quite astonishing, really, the fortitude that they had to show and the determination to get down there. There's even talks about crossbows and crossbow teams, although I don't know if it was in this particular book, but I went and looked up a bit on crossbows. Of course, they fire a bolt, and they're absolutely lethal, the crossbows. The Pope tried to ban them, didn't he? Probably did ban them for a bit, Patrick, didn't he?
I think you're right.
He did. It was deemed to be unsporting or something, not gentlemanly to kill people with a crossbow, for the simple reason that you didn't need to be highly skilled to use it because it was so accurate, a bit like a rifle, really, whereas a longbowman had to understand also a lot of other different things. But a longbowman could operate solo, whereas a crossbowman, they were in teams of 3, at least 2, but usually 3. So they'd have the guy firing the crossbow, they'd have another guy with the second crossbow loading that up. He was the reloader and looking after the bolts, which are shorter than an arrow shaft. They don't travel as far, but they're incredibly accurate, like a rifle, really. That was the whole thing about them, and carried such force behind it. And a third guy with a huge shield behind which all 3 of them were there, trying to make sure that a bolt didn't go through their neck or head. These crossbow teams went down there, a lot of crossbowmen as well.
Paul, the thing with a crossbow is the bolt travels so fast. It's not as formidable as a long arrow because it doesn't have the weight, but it has momentum like no tomorrow.
I know. I mean, I was looking up crossbows over here. I really want to go fire one, actually. We've got a rifle range around here for shotguns and things like that, and I keep meaning to set my lads up there. Maybe when the spring comes and it's just about upon us, we'll go do that. I last went clay pigeon shooting about 30 years ago and nearly put my shoulder out, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, you know
as long
what
as
you
don't
do,
shoot.
Paul? You get one of those pistol crossbows.
Yeah?
And then you just get like a big, thick phone book, and you practice indoors.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't mind.
You can make your own, actually. There's loads on YouTube that show you how to make your own.
Yeah, it takes a little more skill.
Takes a little bit more, but the thing is that the other
like
advantage the crossbow had was that with a bow and arrow, once you pulled that, shall we say, ready to fire, you couldn't hold for very long. For example, if the enemy's coming, you had to draw and then fire. But with a crossbow, you could have it ready to fire and you could wait as long as you want before you fire it. And that was an advantage. And the French used them a lot because you could have, you didn't need much training.
Well, then you could see why that it would be frowned upon, because with a longbow you would have more time to consider what you're shooting at. Whereas if you already have it loaded and ready to go, locked and loaded, you could just shoot at anything and it doesn't, something moved, boom, that's it.
That's it. And the other thing is that it was called the war bow. It was the Victorians, sorry to be a bit pedantic here, that called it the longbow, but it's actually called a war bow. Apparently, so I found out. Unless anybody wants to prove me wrong, but a historian was saying that it was actually from about 1840s. It was known as a longbow, but it's actually a war bow. So there we go. So I could be wrong. You never know. But
so either way, it was
crossbows also have more force because to cock the bow, you can use both arms. And you can pull against a great deal more back pressure than you could with a longbow. A compound bow, now that would be a different story, because compound bows are easier anyway. Certainly not available in those days.
What about the modern ones? That they actually you just cock a bit like a rifle. You can fire about 5 off. You have semi-automatic long crossbows now, and you should go fire, bang, bang, bang. Do about half a dozen shots within about 30 seconds. So that's.
I've been on YouTube every now and again just looking at these things, and the speed of the bolts is they tell you what it is. 550 feet per second. I mean, that's fast. 550 feet is 160 yards. I mean, it's just, boom. It's very, very quick. It's quick enough, let's put it that way, isn't it? So these things, it's a formidable weapon even now. So we're talking about, 1,000 years ago they were using them. Obviously, I don't expect they were necessarily getting the force that we can get with modern, but you never know. I don't know what they had.
But have you seen those tests that there's a slingshot channel? Sorry to chime in there, but there's a thing called the Slingshot channel. It's a German chap. Very interesting on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen that one where he's got the magazine of bolts.
The Colt.
Clever.
They went against different shotguns, and there's a target, and the Colt bullet just bounced off the target, and the crossbow just went straight through the bloody target. Wallop! Yeah, and it's more powerful than a Colt. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at some comments in Rumble with Warren. He's talking about it being impossible to go from Aachen to Jerusalem, even today. I think a lot of them, what they did, because I've read the life of St. John Cassian, who was a Palestinian monk that the Pope sent from Marseille, France, to the Theobad monasteries in Egypt in about, I think it was the year 300, around that time, the 4th century. They'd go by ship, typically.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents about that.
Well, I can't answer Warren's question right now. Warren, you need to read the book and then you can dismiss it, I guess. I'm going to stick with the book for now because it's the only one I've got at the moment. So as I said, this is just my first sort of putting in my toe in the water with the whole thing. There's a lot of descriptions of where they went, their actual dotting around and their movements to get wherever they got to. And their motivations and what they had to cope with and deal with, they're quite amazing. And also the distrust between them and Alexis Comnenus, who was the emperor of Byzantium. And they had a lot of reason to be distrustful of him because he reneged on many agreements to turn up to certain meetings or to allow certain things to happen. And often they would get hungry. And I could understand why people would be worried with large amounts of knights all over the place. One of the things about the lifestyle of the knight, like I was saying earlier, that comes across in the book is that they were just out there fighting all the time. They were just out there fighting a lot. There's this little bit here, right in the early part of the book, where he says, at this point, Pope Urban raised a second issue to which he and his illustrious predecessor Gregory VII had devoted years of effort, the chronic warfare of medieval times. The popes had been attempting to achieve a truce of God among the feudal nobility, many of whom seemed inclined to make war even on their friends just for the sake of a good fight. After all, it was what they had been trained to do every day since early childhood. So there was a lot of fighting going on, a great deal of it. And so what this did for the first time is it got them to, instead of devote their energies to actually killing one another, to go off and defend Christendom, as I guess it must have slowly been imagined in their minds as it was communicated to them and repeated. Some of the communications challenges are amazing as well, in terms of getting the word out across all these monasteries and everywhere, and wherever Urban went, he would gather groups of people together to get the word out, so that as they went along the trail, many just joined them. And this, of course, was a massive problem because there were these things called peasants' crusades. One's called William the Penniless, and the other one's called Peter the Poor or something. And they got huge crowds. Peter the Poor apparently was a very smelly dwarf with bad teeth, but apparently a captivating speaker, which is difficult to sort of add it all up, but it's true, apparently. And they all decided that they wanted to go and defend Christendom too. And this was very, very bad for them. In fact, it couldn't have been more worse because practically all of them got killed, either going down there or on their way back. They were easy prey for all sorts of other armed groups and got picked off in regular raids by Saracens, Moors, Muslims, however you want to label them, as part of their journey. And this is detailed. I'm not going to go through all this, but it's detailed considerably as they go from one city to another and getting the word out and having to make this agreement about food. And if you don't give us this food, we're going to have a battle right now. And these will be with people that should have really been on their own side. So the whole sort of logistical mess of it, or the challenge of it, is considerable, and the way that they sort of dealt with it, ploughing their way through battle after battle, really, to get down there. Another thing that comes up, not that it's a central part necessarily of the story, but technically, he talks about the technical advantage that the Crusaders had, which, we don't think of it in terms of technology, but it's true. And as I said, I was mentioning earlier on, the horses were bigger. This really counted, although they were often outnumbered in these fights. One of the things he mentions, of course, is that the scale of the armies mentioned throughout the historical records on both sides, he said, are ludicrously exaggerated. I mean, they're absolutely colossal. He said, and it's realistically just not the case. We're talking not 50 and 100,000 at battles. We're talking like 10 and 15, but it's still, plenty of battle, if you know what I mean. Excuse me. But there was a thing that he talks about called Greek fire. And I don't know whether this is him making a supposition on this. It's some kind of a gluey, gloppy liquid that they would put into clay bowls, and they would set fire to it, and it would burn a lot. I guess the modern equivalent would be napalm, yeah, but it was glue, like a big gluey thing, which is what napalm, isn't it? And they would fire these at the Corsair boats using catapults up to a distance of, I think he says, about 500 yards, which is considerable. So I guess these are sort of deck-mounted, maybe they're trebuchets or whatever, I don't know. And once they hit the other boat, that was it. They would go up in flames. So that was a massive advantage, and they'd use those not from boat to boat, but really in terms of defending these coastal castles and towns. They'd build walls and do all that kind of stuff. So it's from a sort of technical point of view, not that I'm necessarily obsessed with all that, it's fascinating. The other thing as well that's definitely worth mentioning is the supposed high level of culture of the Muslim invaders. This is not to denigrate it totally, and in fact, someone could probably, talk in great detail about the things that they did do. But the point he makes is that they had taken over so many areas that were Greek Christian and Byzantine Christian that they'd absorbed these people into the whole of their, let's call it culture, their effort. These people basically had a choice. You either work with us and we will let you do a few things, or we'll chop your head off. And many of them, of course, Spain particularly. And so, for example, all the boats that they had, all the galleys, if that was the correct term, the galleys that they had, and there's one battle where they had 1,000, they didn't build any of them because they're not boat building people. If you look at the logistics of it, they didn't build any of the boats. They were all built by Italian and Byzantine shipwrights that they'd acquired by going through all these islands, and they took over a lot of islands. I think they took over Sicily and a couple of others as well. All of this stuff just kept going on and on and on, all around the Mediterranean. And they acquired these people, brought them into their camp. And this is also explains some of the architecture that we laud them about in Spain, because it wasn't designed and built by them. It was designed and built by Byzantine, Italian, and Greek architects who came from the classical traditions out of certain cities where they had this great knowledge base. And so it's attributed to them, but they were the ones that actually designed it, and much of it is in a sort of Byzantine pattern. Not that I'm familiar with this, I'm just quoting from the book or remembering sort of in certain phrases. So the idea of the kind of, yet again, it's this thing about the noble savage with the Red Indian. When you really look into it, and if you look into Tom Goodrich's book, Scalp Dance, you'll find out that this is a nonsense. It's not really true. I'm not saying they were all evil, but in terms of the unleashing of bloody hell, the Red Indians were very good at that. And it's the same with this story as well. Certainly there's a very similar line, that it's not quite what we've been told. And did anybody here see that film that Ridley Scott made about 20 years back, 2005? Yes. What's it called? Something of Heaven.
Kingdom of Heaven or something.
Kingdom of Heaven.
I think it was.
And I mean, visually in parts, it's absolutely spectacular and amazing. But there's a lot of guff in it, and I knew there was guff in it when I first watched it.
Yeah, the plot was kind of forgettable, but it was very visual and dramatic action flick.
Yes, it was. It meant to be a crusading type thing, but very highly romanticized and stylistic. But kind of got certain points across, and obviously embellished others. And it's got the beautiful, what's her name? And it's Sarah Green, is it? That French actress. She was in the James Bond movie later on. She plays Queen Noor. Absolutely ridiculously beautiful woman at the time. I don't know why I'm saying this. It's just something that I remembered going through the clips today and looking at certain things. I would recommend the book. I would definitely recommend it. If you want a fast and good overview read, which is what he says it is. It's the case for the Crusades, and I think he makes it well. Now, I've just read one book, so this is not a lot to recommend it, is it? But it's got a good feeling about the whole thing. It really does.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've recently been reading and recording a audiobook that I'm making of Saint Alphonsus de Liguori's book, The Victories of the Martyrs, which goes from all of the early Christian martyrs close to the time of Jesus up until the Japanese martyrs of the 1600s, that and everything in between. But you were dealing with the Roman Empire and its decline and its international scope, and you had the Eastern Empire, which was represented by the Greeks or the Byzantines, and then you have the Western Empire, which was the Latins or the Italians and Franks, and later on the British. Like you read Canterbury Tales, you hear a lot about returning Crusaders and what they went through, that sort of thing. But what they were doing, you'd have the Roman Empire, and the emperors would have the Christians. You'd have soldiers in that converted to Christianity. You even had Emperor Constantine, which Constantinople is named after Constantine. He was the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. And then his son, Julian, they call him Julian the Apostate, converted back to paganism and then started persecuting the Christians again and killing them if they didn't worship the gods or the idols.
Yeah.
That sort of, and then it goes on into the Muslim period when that whole empire was taken over by Islamic forces, and the trade routes, I could imagine there are a lot of pilgrims that were going between, say, France, which Marseille is like the main hub, and then Italy and Rome, to Syria, and down into Egypt and all those places, where it got taken over, and gradually that became the battle, was between the Muslims rather than the pagans. As far as that period of time, the 1,000-year span, which is quite a lot of time if you think about it, between Jesus' time and then the beginning of the Crusades. And then it just kind of kicks off into, from there till, later on, there was the Battle of Lepanto in the 1400s, which was basically, if you read about the Battle of Lepanto, it's fascinating because you talk about the ships and all that kind of thing, how they looted Roman ships and then used them and repurposed them. You should look into the history of Lepanto, because that was another battle where the Muslim forces were coming in through Crete. They had a base of operations there, and then going into the Adriatic Sea, and they were going to go in through Venice and take over, but they were beaten back by the Pope's forces. I think it was Pius V that led that. And you could call these things crusades, but there were really only like 8, before I sent you that, 8 crusades up until 1270, from like 1020 to 1270. And 1270 was St. Louis, King of France, the only King of France to be canonized a Christian saint. But the one in Lepanto was later in the 1400s, and they almost came up and defeated the Christians, but they didn't. It was a miracle that they didn't. But it's, when you go into the funding of the Muslim side, it was actually this rich Jewish merchant named Joseph Nazi.
Really?
Who was funding them to go in. Yeah, it's just an odd name for
what
that.
year is it? What year are we talking about here,
1400s, early 1400s, the Battle of Lepanto.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a pivotal battle there too, to push back the Christians pushing back on the Muslims, but also then you have this other aspect, because there's the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim part, which when you look at it, everyone who's considered a heathen isn't one of those three. Those are like the three main European religions that have a big consequence in the 2,000 year span of history, after paganism in the Roman Empire was more or less replaced by monotheism. So it's just a fascinating history if you really go through all of this and spend the time. I think it was the last show or the show before that, I mentioned a homeschool book that I had taken a course called Seton Homeschooling, and the woman who developed it, her name was Ann Carroll. She wrote a book called Christ, King of History, with Christ as the focal point of all history, even to the point where our calendar is based off of Christ. So, from the time of Christ, which is the year 0, to now. But that's well worth the read, too, if you want to learn more about the Crusades. I remember reading it. I don't remember all the details. There's so much that went into it. And that
the thing that kind of the bit that I'm one of there's so many aspects of it. Like, if you use the word interest as if it's an academic thing, I don't think this is academic. I think it's highly relevant to our times right now. That's what's drawn me to it. The dates are important in this, and I don't have them in my head because I don't know them yet. But when Islam began, when Muhammad said, "Whoa, I've just had all this stuff from, I've had a visit from," what does he say, the angel Gabriel or something?
Yeah, Gabriel.
It doesn't take long before the swords are out. It's all. That's my understanding. It doesn't take long before this "we take over the world by force" approach, in putting it in simple terms, begins. It's almost immediate. And this, the founding story of Islam, for me, is highly suspicious. And I'm saying that not knowing the whole thing. I've just always, it doesn't sound or even feel right in any way, shape or form. It's too instantaneous, the willingness to get bloodletting.
Well, this history of the martyrs that I was talking about goes into that, because there's a trade-off around that time when you had the pagan persecution of the Christians, and then it switched over to the Muslim Mohammedan persecution. Because what had happened, there were all sorts of internal disputes in Christianity that took place. One was the Arian heresy, where in Egypt, I think is where it took place, where you had the group that believed that Christ was both man and God.
Right.
And then you had Arian who believed that he was just a man. So, and that's more of the Muslim type ideology. It ended up developing. He was pre-Muhammad, and that whole thing developed into that. And the rebellion against the Romans was part of that too, because the Romans were coming in and having people sacrifice to the gods, and if they didn't do it, they would kill them and persecute them. And there were Christians that said, well, we should go and we should kill them. I mean, heretics, so to speak, like the eye for an eye type of justice. And that they split off. Like Arianism was one of them that split off. And then it developed into a rebellion reaction to that, and a warring faction that the Mohammedans took over and thrived especially in the old Roman Empire that goes in through northern Africa and up into Spain, and then even into the what we call Western Asia, Turkey. But it's fascinating because it tells you a lot about what's happening in our present day, because obviously Europe has a lot more Muslims than it did even 50 years ago. So there's something that's going
and of course
on.
it's politically an almost verboten, using the word,
Well, yeah, because
topic.
you're talking about Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and then anytime you start naming people based on their religion, the people get sensitive to it, and there's that whole history there that if you know about it, you can talk about it, but if you don't know about it, then it becomes like then violence happens because people get offended, but they don't know why they're offended. And then it leads to more violence, and it's not good.
Yeah. Well,
Some
we
people
have.
don't even know why.
It's true.
They're offended and they don't know why. You ask them, why are you offended? They say, I don't know, but I am.
Yep. There's definitely that. And we've had a thing here recently in contemporary communication with the last sort of 24, 48 hours about two-tier judgments over here for people that are from so-called minorities. I mean, I'm beginning to think that the English, of course, are the designated minority of today or tomorrow on the way.
Right now, you've got Crusader Kier going to Ukraine and getting your boys all, riled up, ready to go and join the crusade to go and fight evil Putin. That's big.
It just doesn't stand up, though. You're right, but it just doesn't stand up. It's a completely. No. It's so idiotic. You can't believe that they're even willing to keep on saying these things. And there are so many voices, even in the mainstream media, that are aware of this. I mean, there are many dorks, of course, that just go along with it. Putin's really bad. No one ever really talks about the fundamental background to any of these things. This is why if you don't know the history to just about anything, and history can mean what's happened over the last 6 months, because it's all in the past. I mean, we're not talking necessarily you got to go back thousands of years, although sometimes even that is valuable because, as we've mentioned before, human nature never really changes. And they're just saying things always out of context. I heard someone today saying, you can't trust the Russians. What does that mean? Stop talking nonsense. You can't trust the British government.
It's like saying,
you can't trust any of you.
You can't trust the Byzantines.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't trust any of you. You're not trustworthy people. Don't you understand? They say it as if, we are trustworthy, but the Russians aren't. No, none of you are. Come on, get a grip. What are you talking about?
I have an idea. I have an idea.
An idea, do you?
If you want to figure out, if you want to continue any conversation with somebody, you just ask them a question. And if they come up with an emotional response or with a response to your question, ask them why. If they can tell you why, that means that they're working from an analytical and logical headspace, and that they actually have the ability to enunciate why they hold that position. If they cannot, if they say, I don't know, I just don't, or I don't know, but that's just the way it is, then they're working from a reactionary, emotional headspace, and that is probably a thought that was put in their cranium by somebody else, and you can immediately turn around and say, thank you so much, enjoyed the conversation, have a nice day, now bugger off, will you, and leave.
Now bugger off. Absolutely.
Go on to the next person. So there's your basic rule of thumb. There is readings from the words of wisdom by Paul in the United States. And save you a bunch of time in conversations going forward.
It's spot on. I mean, somebody sent me something today about a definition of a psyop. And it's basically, the basic thing of a psyop is when you're not allowed to respond.
Yeah, it's a breakdown of communication between two subjugated groups.
Yeah. So when they say you can't talk about that, a psyop's in play. What are you on about? Free speech involves free inquiry. They go hand in hand. They're inextricably linked. It includes free questioning, i.e. you have freedom of mind to actually ask questions. And when someone says you can't, the fix is in. And I know it's stating the bleeding obvious, but we need to remember this kind of stuff. And they're doing it now, or they're trying to do it now. But I just think this current crop of people that are communicating are so pathetic. I mean, I can't believe that anybody believe anything that they say. And yet you find that supposedly, because the mainstream media want to paint and create this sense of agreement, that they do. Oh, yeah, those tricky Russians. What are you talking about? Yeah, they're all tricky all the time. Well, of course they bloody are. So did anybody see... I know we've kind of moved away from it. I might hop back to the Crusades every now and again. But... have you seen that? Oh, gosh. Everybody's name's jumping out of my head. I'm going to put it down to this coal. I can't seem to recall names at the moment. I've gone all sort of foggy.
You need some Ricola. Ricola?
Do I?
You get that?
Yes.
You have that over there?
By the way, if you check the private chat, there is a link to a song that was put in there by Patrick. I grabbed it, recoded it, and then dropped it in Telegram. So the link to
that song has a new meaning nowadays with Elon Musk. It used to mean about XER, which is the big border blaster down in Mexico. Where that's a whole story with what was his name? Romulus Brinkley. John Brinkley. He was one of the first three
Jeffrey
people.
Sachs. Sorry, I just had to say the name while it jumped into my head. Sorry.
Anyway. No, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry. I did it the other day. I was trying to think of... Oh, that was it. Yesterday, I was doing a thing with Karen. Shout out to Karen on Wise Women Weekly. We were talking about the Holocaust very guardedly.
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember Fred Leuchter's name at all until the word report came into my head. I said, he did a report. I certainly got it. Leuchter report. Okay. So, yeah, I definitely think I'm getting frilly around the edges in terms of name recall. I can see their faces all the time in my head. But unfortunately, their faces didn't come with their name tattooed on the forehead, so I can't read it. It's very difficult in my image systems. But yeah, just going back to Jeffrey Sachs, because there's been a lot of fun in the political panto world recently. It's just been mad. Sachs was in Europe. I think it was, where are we now, Thursday? Was it the beginning of last week? I think it was. If anybody's familiar with it, you'll know what I'm talking about. 26 minutes long. He's in Europe and he's talking to an agglomeration of, I suspect, European reporters and some bods of some sort. It's one of the most valuable communications around this entire Russia-Ukraine debacle because he gives everybody the history lesson that they don't want to remember or recall. And the essence of the whole problem here is to do with the expansion of NATO up to the borders of Russia. That's it.
Yeah, and how they promised not to move an inch back in the 91 or whenever it was.
Yeah, we will never do that. We're all settled. This is, of course, turns out retrospectively to be complete manure. Oh, yeah, well, NATO and the Americans and the Europe, they're all tricksy. Yeah, you are. That's why we don't support any of you, because you're all liars. And, of course, you got that Bint Newland, who then in 2014 started horsing around out there doing whatever nonsense she was up to. And, yeah, all the time the Russians are painted as evil. And I think the Russian tactic is spot on. They just stay silent. I don't know how they do it, because they've lost a lot, according to the reports that we've read, they've lost an awful lot of men having a dispute with people who are fundamentally their people.
Yeah,
and I never see a reminder
for not doing anything about it.
Yeah,
because
there's never ever reminder about the slaughter of those 20,000 Russians in the Donbass region, which is what caused this to start. Hey, you're killing all my people here on the border between the two of us. That's not on. We're coming in because you're using force, so we're going to have to counteract that. Sorry, that's the way it goes, No one in their right mind would allow sections that people in a sort of, say, certain section of England, like Cornwall, I've mentioned it before, to just, if Chinese turn up, just started killing them, go, it's all right. It's not all right. It's not all right. And yet they talk as if the Russians have got absolutely nothing to complain about. And it's bizarre as well, this relationship with buying their energy. They're not buying it, then blowing up that, whatever is that Nord Stream thing or whatever, which is obviously an American thing apparently now. It's all come out. I'm not bothered who did it, whether they're Americans, Brits or whoever. Basically, they're nutters, the lot of them, and we're all supposed to buy their lies, aren't we? Over and over again. But
last week, two apps, they blew up the Russian Black Sea port where they did most of the LNG refining and oil refinery type stuff. It's their main port for that in the Black Sea. They blew it up before Zelensky came in to the White House. So that was fresh.
Just to completely break the mood, do you want a poem about a Crusader?
Do it.
Here we go. It's very short. It's by Ogden Nash. There you go. A Crusader's wife slipped from the garrison and had an affair with a Saracen. She was not oversexed or jealous or vexed. She just wanted to make a comparison. There you go. I quite like that. Maybe I'd need to read it again. What's that? Where's Eric? I don't know.
Where's Eric? Eric, are you here?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm still here. Yes, I'm still here. Yes.
Listen, I'm going to read it again.
There.
Now that you've heard it once, I'm going to read it again now so you can get your logos. It's only 5 lines and it's a limerick. A Crusader's wife slipped from the garrison and had an affair with a Saracen. She was not oversexed or jealous or vexed, but just wanted to make a comparison. I think that's quite good. Ogden Nash, quite good. Very quirky poet, Ogden Nash. Great name, though. Always makes me think of tobacco, though, because there used to be a tobacco over here called Ogden's Best Rub or something like that, and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. Don't say you can't write witty poems about the Crusades. You can, or at least Crusaders' wives. Paul, you mentioned something about a song or something. Did you send me a track somewhere?
Yeah, the link to it is in the private chat. The private chat here. Okay, I'll just poddle around because we haven't had. Look at me. My timekeeping's terrible. I'm going to put it down to my cold. I'm going to blame everything on that today. It's the best thing to do, isn't it? So, where's it all gone? Okay, I'll dig it up. It's going to take me a second or two to, excuse me, find it and load it. But yeah, the other funny thing, the highly amusing thing was the Three Stooges on Friday. The White House lads, Donald and J.D. Vance and J.D. Zelensky doing a soap opera bit. I'm assuming everybody's caught this. Yeah, you can call it that.
Brilliant acting. I'll tell you something, as Oscar-winning performances, weren't they? I mean, spot on. Yeah. It's all an act, as far as I'm concerned. Total act. And now they sang on the... I was in my car yesterday and I put the radio on. Classic FM, and the I won't call it news, but shall we say the propaganda came on, and they said that things are getting back to normal with America. Zelensky's getting back to normal with America. Is he really? Couldn't care less.
Well, the COVID era, new normal, you mean?
Yeah.
New normal.
A new normal, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I started writing a little thing. I thought I was going to, if I had enough time and hadn't felt so grotty.
Oh, yes, yes.
What I thought would have been good, what I thought would have been good was to write an alternative script for that. So I was writing this sort of mock broadcast. I've got a bit of notes here. It just said, last Friday's episode of The White House Lads, starring Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and special guest star Volodymyr Penis piano player Zelensky, was a big hit across the international networks. Many viewers who enjoyed that show wrote in to ask us if there will be any more episodes. While we can't guarantee that there will be, as the actors are all very busy during this political panto season, which doesn't seem to end, you may be pleased to know that some alternative scripts have come to our attention. And what I thought we could do is we need to write those scripts and reenact them, lads, every week. So I don't know what roles you would play. I don't know who we could get to play Zelensky. We need someone, obviously, that sounds like Count Dracula
Adrian
or
Brody,
something.
He just won the Oscar for Best Actor. Get him to
Did
do
he?
it. Yeah, he won it twice. Once for The Pianist, and then this new film called
Be honest.
The new film is called The Brutalist. So.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
it's not even
it's unbelievable.
Sequels.
It was unbelievably mad, that. I've never heard any, what we were supposed to do. There's obviously some psychological abuse that we were receiving that we can't yet work out. Seriously, they wouldn't have done this by accident, would they? Someone didn't say, just leave the cameras on. I mean, it's a joke.
Well, the fact
so this is what
they had the vice president there, you know, tag teaming with Trump. It's like a WWF match from back in the 80s with Hulk Hogan and Macho Man or something, you know, something
it
like
was. That. You go. Oh, yeah. You have a go. You have a go. Listen, I'm going to play a song. It's not the one you sent, Paul, because I don't like ZZ Top. That's not true. I do, but I don't really want to play it right. It's too much for my delicate little brain. I played this some weeks ago, and then somebody asked me about it. This is by... I'm just going to play it again. I'm just in a repetition mood because we only play songs once anyway. This is Port Arthur Blues by Wade Frudgy. And then I've got a couple of little audio clips, one from a film that I want to talk about in relation to banking, and another one which is Spike Milligan, Eric. That'll be quite fun. So we're going to go, here we go. We'll play this song. We'll play a little station ID and all that kind of stuff. We'll be back out in about 3 or 4 minutes, something like that. Zydeco, everyone. Your favourite music. Go on, admit it. You listen to Paul English Live here on WBN. We're here every Thursday, 3 o'clock US Eastern, 8 p.m. in the UK. Now, chaps, that music just then, I think that would have made good accompanying music to the soap opera last Friday. That would have been pretty good. The Three Stooges. There was something slightly surreal and wacky about all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, anyway, for those of you that like Zydeco, and I'm one of them when it's good like that, although I've got his entire album, and that's the standout track. That's Port Arthur Blues by Wade Fruget. American people, am I pronouncing that correctly? What say ye, Patrick or Paul? Is that correctly pronounced? Oh, everybody's gone quiet. I don't seem to be able to hear you. Hang on just a minute. Maybe the studio went to sleep or something. Let's just have a look.
I'm going to hear you.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, there we go. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Patrick had to go out and gather. Oh, right. Okay. Well, it's Patrick. Maybe he had to go out and gather.
I think he went for firewood.
Yeah, maybe he went to gather in the cheese. Anyway, Paul, Fruget, F-R-U-J-E with an accent.
Sorry,
How do you pronounce that? How do I pronounce that, Patrick? Wade Fruget. Fruge. Fruget? I like to pronounce it Frudgy because I know that that's wrong.
You play Zydeco, and now we're talking Creole, eh?
Yeah, only momentarily. This is not the Creole show. That's next week, of course. Me and Eric are practicing like mad.
Oh no,
we must. Yeah. It's going to be very, very bad. That. Anyway. Whilst I'm playing clips in an odd and zany order that have not got anything to do with one another, here's another one. This is Spike Milligan. Just a little chat with Bob Monkhouse, who is a British host from I came across this the other day, and I just liked it. And it's got nothing to do with anything that we're talking about, but it's just good life. Here we go. Here's Spike and Bob.
How did you join the army?
But they wrote to me. I received what I'd call a cunningly worded invitation to get killed. And I know at the day it was a really, I suppose, a military family. It was a really, I suppose, a very proud day for me and my family as 8 military policemen dragged me screaming out the house. Ripped off my nun's disguise. It's a nasty habit you got there, one of them said. I went to Bexhill Station. I was greeted by a sergeant there. One of these sergeants with these very white stripes, you know. And up here, though. Oh, yes. I said, good morning to him. And he was stuck for an answer. He said, never mind all them witty London sayings. He said... He said, no, he said, you look intelligent. I said, well, I do impressions. I said, no, look, he said, you look intelligent. He said, would you like a commission? I said, no, I'd rather have a weekly wage. It might be a very short war, you know, with very little interest. In fact, I think I've lost interest already, I said. And this sergeant said, silence when you speak to an officer. And I remember the food, Christ, the food. It's the one they didn't call for volunteers to eat it. I held my mess tin out once, and something went in it, and I said to this chap, I said, what's this? He said, it's bean stew. I said, never mind what it's been. I said, what is it now? And, after it was all over, after being in the trenches for 5 years and shot at both sides, guess what they give you for surviving it? 50 quid. If you got killed, you got 500, you know. My mother and father kept sending me back. Can't you go and get killed, son? You get off if you were killed.
Oh, those days will be back with us if we don't watch it. If we don't watch it with these lunatics. Quite like that. That was a humorous interlude. And a humorous interlude for the show. Yeah, we got to throw these things in when you come. I don't know where to fit these things in, so I just want to play it. It's great stuff. Really good stuff. Wonderful.
Far better than Zelensky playing the piano with his ding dong, isn't it? Really, because he gets a bit upset about that. Because I know one of the women interviewers brought that up, and he gave her a mouthful. He really did. He was very upset about it. Sorry, it's terrible.
Was he?
Yes.
Oh, Eddie.
Was anything rude there? No, not at all.
No, of course not. I don't know what you're talking about. It's clean as a whistle.
That's
I think, yeah. I still find it remarkable that they. Oh gosh, we can't keep going on about this. It's just obviously bizarre. I mean, these people that actually say these things as if he really is the leader of the Ukraine. It's just it's tragic, isn't it? This world leader, what? He's just a nonce. I mean, just look at him. He's a joke. He's like Macron and the rest of them. All of these. They're all, you know, I heard a thing today. I've got an interview. Someone just sent me, and I haven't had time to watch it today. Looked really good. Never heard of the guy, some kind of an analyst of European politics, who's basically saying they're all shot to bits. So Blair, all of them, Mandelson, the whole lot, the entire sort of European superstructure of politicians are all, you know, they're all finished. And my thought is, I didn't even realise they'd started. I mean, I've never taken these people seriously. I mean, it's just gloss on the mainstream media for 30 years of these buffoons who think because they've been put in this role, they're all jacked up and full of it and think that they're world leaders. And you wouldn't put them in charge of a tobacconist. I mean, would you? Not that you can have a tobacconist, but it's unlawful to have a tobacconist these days. But, I mean, there's no degree to the amount of abuse, verbal abuse, that we can give them. I mean, there's no limit to it. It could just go on for days. We'd all get bored of it. It might be funny for a while, but it's a sad state where this complete male bimbo, who was obviously a goofy sort of tart of a bloke, is poncing around, you know, looking like an idiot and speaking like an idiot and whining and then doing Three Stooges with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, possibly his finest hour, I suppose, as an actor and all that kind of stuff.
Hasn't he ever heard of a suit, though? I mean, he looks as if he's just coming from sort of cleaning out a drain.
He did wear a suit for Netanyahu.
Oh, yeah, but that's his boss, isn't it? Oh, yes.
Did he?
Yes.
Boss is in town, eh?
Yes.
Volodymyr, you better get your suit on. I mean, just, yeah. You wouldn't actually pay him time of day or anything. He just looks weak. He is weak. He's got a weak mouth, and he's just weak. It's not a brain or anything. It's just nonsense. And all of this theatre stops us getting to the point of discussing what's really going on. And that's why I say Jeffrey Sachs was an actual adult communication about it. And you realise that they don't exist in mainstream media until you actually re-engage with one, like he did. So he was thoughtful. He was informed, he was articulate, he made his case, he spoke for 25 minutes. If you haven't seen it, you need to look it up and watch it. Maybe many of you here will already know all this stuff, but I've been sending it to a few people who don't know, and I say, look, this is 25 minutes well spent. And that's not bad, is it? You're not saying, here's a 3-hour video. Sending 3-hour videos to people is completely not on. It's totally useless. We need short, sharp things, but that's...
TikTok.
It was, yeah, that's too short. That's too short, I think. But no, it's you've got to sum these things up. The expansion of NATO, they don't like it. No, really? Yeah,
Paul.
no, we don't like it. You know, so
Paul.
Yes, Paul.
TikTok.
What about
it
TikTok?
is the closest video social media platform to the approximate length of the attention span of the global population. TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm on board. You try it out. You ask them to listen to anything longer than 2 minutes long. You lost them at 1.5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Well,
Supposed to be a cat
put
doing
down
something cute
TikTok and
somewhere.
pick up a book. Read a book,
Yeah.
everybody. Quit scrolling.
But they didn't even hear you say that. This is the problem, Patrick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, maybe, is it not the case that if all those wonderful rock and roll and pop bands of the 1930s were constrained by the single to run for a maximum of 3 minutes and 25 seconds or whatever the plastic the vinyl would hold, isn't that our challenge then, to actually start coming down with 2-minute pithy glue things to get the point across? I've got to get around to doing stuff like this. I mean, it's not really my style. I was talking earlier to someone today about I'm not spending as much time in the news cycle. Probably someone's going to say, yeah, the show shows it. We're not really on. But actually, I'm not attached to it at all because
You're
it's
sane, that's why.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
if you follow it too much, it just you can't. It's attention deficit disorder, ADD.
it is. I was noting how much time it's consuming out of things, and it leaves you dissatisfied because you don't grow in it at all. You don't strengthen your vocabulary, your understanding. Nothing happens. You just have a bout of being alarmed or getting everybody else's view.
Or angry.
And one of the things about, there's a phrase that someone said years ago, it's probably true, that if you were to spend, and this applies to all of us, and this is why, I guess shows like this or whatever are always having to move around to try and find a new sort of path for X number of months, weeks, or whatever, even the next 10 minutes sometimes, is if you were to sit at the feet of a guru, after 3 years, you'd know everything he knew. That's it. Most of us could probably download everything, all your experience that you've built up your entire life in about 3 years, if you were just communicating on a regular basis. And I think for the communicators, they kind of get drained. And if you look, I've often thought about this with regards to Alex Jones. I'm just picking him out because he's the most obvious one. Why is he motivated to do what he does in the morning? Is it, you must do this, Alex, otherwise we'll kill you? Is that what's going on? You've been doing it for 25 years, like even longer than that. Is this kind of approach, is the excessive amplification of the news cycle doing us any good at all? And I would say
I had a question for you about one of your politicians, George Galloway. What are your thoughts about him? Because he's been getting more prominent lately.
He's a very good political opportunist. He has a way of communicating that at times, and he said good. Look, he's a bit like a broken clock. They all are, I think. Every now and again, they're going to say stuff that you're going to go, "That's right," but are any of them consistent? What does he do, Eric, these days? I know he runs around being a Scot.
He was in Big
and he's
Brother,
bright.
wasn't he?
Making
out. He was. I don't know what was he doing there. But looked a bit revolting in that. But he is. He's like most politicians. He's an actor. He's a very good actor, and he tells people what they want to hear. And that's the role of a good politician, to tell people what they want to hear. And then once they're elected, they do the complete opposite. So that's it, really. He comes across as sincere, but as I say, what kind of person will want to work in a building like Westminster, where it's full of criminals, paedophiles, and the worst scum you could ever not wish to meet? So no, I haven't got much time for anybody like that. Part of the system, as far as I'm concerned, and you've got to be part of the system to get there. So
you do,
yeah,
you do. You absolutely do. Government
is mafia. No ifs, no buts. In fact, the mafia do more for the community than probably the government. This sounds a bit weird. In South America, they have a lottery system, which is absolutely scrupulously honest, which is run by the mafia. So, really, no, when people say to me mafia, government rather, I just think mafia. That's all they are. Because more people have been killed by their own governments than all the wars put together.
I think mafia is it, Eric. I think that too. It's like turf war.
Yeah.
It's just a turf war between the Capone gang and whoever it was that they shot on the St. Valentine's Day massacre.
Instead of the deep state, it's the mafia state.
Yeah.
Well, you mention anything about usury. If any of them mention anything about usury, they have a nasty accident. Or what happened to Nick Griffin. They had it part of their, I probably said this before, but the BNP, it was part of their, what do they call it? I can't think of the word now. When they put out all what they're going to do. Platform, thank you. And they're going to abolish usury.
Yeah.
Manifesto, sorry, that's the English one, a manifesto. And he had a little knock on the door by the men in suits from the special branch, and the Secret Service, who said, take that out of your manifesto or we destroy you and your political party. He didn't. Who's heard of Nick Griffin now, and where are the BNP now? That's it.
Yeah.
Well, you touch on something. Yeah, you touch on something there, Eric, that I know I like to touch upon as well, and we all should, is the methodology of how we would bring it about. Well, I think about this quite a lot. We've mentioned before that if a political party were to come along with good people in it with policies like that, how would we defend them? Because the people that want to take them out are really good at killing people and destroying their
you
lives.
need an institution. You need a crusade.
Yeah. So even if you had these men in abeyance, and you don't need to be, the other thing, of course, with these things is you don't need so-called geniuses. That's all part of their, oh, you're not good enough to be in politics nonsense and all this kind of stuff. Not that you'd want to be, because it's just a pit of vipers.
You need confidence.
You don't, yeah, but you need protection. You know, Cromwell had his Ironsides for a damn good reason, because it's all about violence at the top level. That's what it's about. It's about violating the other people. You're not getting your way, I'm getting my way. That's that.
All you need to have effective government is people in it that understand what the voting population has to go through just in daily life. And that politician just has to think, well, what would I want? No, what would be good for me? Because if it's good for me, it'll be good for them. Because we're all cut from the same cloth. And I don't think we have a mafia. I don't. I mean, I'm sorry, Eric. I'm going to have to disagree with you. We don't have a mafia. I think they would have to step up their game to even equal a mafia, because mafias, they're organized. They have an understood hierarchy of power, and they respect family, and they understand the value of a good cannoli. I don't think any of these guys in D.C. or anywhere in any governmental parliament could say the same thing. None of them.
Well, I can't even say the word cannoli. What is a cannoli? Come on.
Oh,
Start laughing at me.
Cannoli is a pastry to die for.
Is it?
It's a cream-filled croissant.
Yes.
Think of it that way, a hard croissant.
I don't want to go off on a big food tangent here. We'll never come back. We'll be lost in the realms of patisseries and boulangerie and all this kind of stuff. It'll be terrible. I'll end up talking about curd tart and things like this. I don't want to do that. Not in this show right now. But talking about usury and political control and power and all that kind of stuff. Look at how I'm making a segue here. I know the first bit was about the Crusades. I want to keep returning to that, certainly about that book. By the way, just a quick reminder, God's Battalions by Rodney Stark is what we were talking about. And it's you can pick it up pretty cheap second-hand. I think I paid only about £8 for mine. And for those of you that know nothing about it, I think it's a great introduction. Anyway, so there we go. Now, some of you may be familiar with a drama series that the BBC have been doing. I can't tell you exactly what the years are, based on a trilogy by a woman called Hilary Mantel. And the first one is called Wolf Hall. And Eric, living in England, have you heard of this?
Nope, because I don't have a telly.
Right. Okay. But you've not heard of the books either.
No.
Paul and Patrick, are you familiar with? Have you ever heard of this book called Wolf Hall?
Refresh my memory, please.
Well, I think, Patrick, particularly, you'll find it probably very interesting. I haven't read the book. I just happened to stumble across the TV series. I think they've just done. I don't watch much TV. I don't watch sort of entertainment stuff like that. It's a BBC. It's a BBC production, yeah, and it's harks back to when they really could screw a thing together well. So whichever department has done it, it's good. I mean, I think it's absolutely outstandingly good, and it's obviously outstandingly good because it's based on these books by Mantell, who is she's unfortunately no longer alive. She died at the age of 70, only about 4 or 5 years ago, and she obviously is thorough in her research. Now, Wolf Hall is a place called Wolf Hall, but what it's about is a chap called Thomas Cromwell, who was pivotal during the Reformation, because he ends up becoming Henry VIII's right-hand man. And he is a lawyer, basically, but a very well-connected one in all sorts of ways. And I'm only watched, and this is how bizarre it is, I've watched 2.5 episodes of it. The interesting thing about it is, obviously, the world back then was quieter. There are no cars in it, or trains, or jet engines. Nobody has got a radio because they didn't have them. No one's playing music. All you've got is dialogue and gatherings around flagons of wine from time to time, and this, that, and the other. And horses, yeah. Yes. And men-at-arms and that kind of stuff. And it's the build-up, the tension, the build-up of this situation for Henry. and his advisors and the spats between them and so on and so forth. I'm just giving you a very general overview. It doesn't sound different to anything else, and maybe it's not. But there's a guy called Mark Rylance who plays the role of Thomas Cromwell. And he was the voice, actually, of the giant in the BFG. He's got a very interesting voice, and he's a very still sort of actor. He's a bit of a scene stealer because he doesn't do too much, and therefore he's doing loads, if you know what I mean. He's still. So he plays this role. Anyway, there was a scene has just developed, because I'm going to play it to you, because although it's about the drama itself, it also addresses these early days of financial control of individuals, which is quite a thing. And just by way of a bit of background, Cromwell in his earlier days was based in Italy and Venice, and knew all of the accountants and bankers and the counting houses and all this, that and the other. He's connected with all of those people. He's very sharp. And this is how he rises to power, because he's, as a communicator and as a manipulator, although that might be a bit heavy, but as a person who can see the way through with things, he's very good. And he was loyal to Cardinal Wolsey, which may ring a bell for you, Patrick. Wolsey. Yeah,
and he's also the reason Thomas More was put to death.
That's right. He is, absolutely. Wolsey, he defended Wolsey staunchly, did Cromwell, but Wolsey couldn't get Henry's marriage to Catherine annulled by the Pope. So Wolsey had to go, and Cromwell stayed loyal to him even after he'd gone and he died in his early 50s. And there's some amazing reports about Wolsey, again, from Venetian ambassadors. If you're into this sort of thing, I obviously am. If you go and read these reports written by these guys at this time, you can tell that you're dealing with individuals that are astonishingly bright, really, are very, very bright people. They must have been the small, that 0.3% of people, but they're the ones that are doing the writing. Anyway, at this point, 2.5 hours into the whole thing, middle of episode 3, there's a guy called Henry Percy who had been betrothed to Anne Boleyn. Here we are, we're getting an English history lesson, right? And as many of you will know, it was Anne Boleyn that was causing Henry to want to throw Catherine out of the bus, right? That's basically what was happening. And it took quite a few years for them to finally get together, and Anne sort of pushed him. Anyway, she'd been betrothed to a guy called Henry Percy. And Percy's a bit of a louche, and had been given an earldom by the king, and but not doing a good job, and has been going around shooting his mouth off about Anne being free, i.e. free with her favours. That was the implication of it. This is a clip of about 2.5 minutes, but addresses the money thing as well. And it's also got quite an ending to it. And I just wanted to play it to you because I saw it yesterday and I showed it to one of my sons. I said, watch this. And I said, it's kind of got a bit of impact. And I said, that is a very important communication. And we're going to play it for you. There's Mark Rylance as Thomas Cromwell from this middle of this episode 3. And he's addressing a slightly drunk Henry Percy. He's about to confront him over the way he's talking about this woman he was betrothed to, Anne Boleyn, who is due to become the Queen of Henry. Just cop a load of this. And it's not playing. Why is it not playing? Hang on. All right, there we go. I know why it's not playing. Just a minute. I had the channel on mute. What a great introduction and a cock-up. But here we go.
Oh, you're wasting your time. I was pledged to Anne. She allowed me such freedom with herself as only a betrothed woman would allow. Cardinal bullied me out of saying anything last time. I'm not afraid to speak the truth now.
Good. My lord, you've said what you have to say. Now, listen to me. You're a man whose money is almost spent. I'm a man who knows how you've spent it. You're a man who's borrowed all over Europe. I'm a man who knows your creditors. One word from me, and all your debts will be called in.
And what are they going to do? Bankers don't have armies.
Neither will you without any money. My lord, you hold your earldom from the king. Your task is to secure the north to defend us against Scotland. If you cannot ensure these things, the king will take your land and your titles and give them to somebody who will do the job you cannot do.
No, he won't. He respects all ancient titles.
How can I explain this to you? The world is not run from where you think it is, from border fortresses, even from Whitehall. The world is run from Antwerp, from Florence, from Lisbon, from wherever the merchant ships set sail off into the west. Not from castle walls, from counting houses, from the pens that scrape out your promissory notes. So believe me when I say that my banker friends and I will rip your life apart. And then, when you are without money and title, yes, I can picture you. Living in a hovel, wearing homespun, bringing home a rabbit for the pot, your lawful wife, Anne Boleyn, skinning and jointing that rabbit. Yes, I wish you all happiness. You were never pre-contracted. Any understanding you think you have, you didn't have it. And if you think Lady Anne loves you, well, you couldn't be more mistaken. I've just come from her. She hates you. She despises you. She wants you gone. So if you say one more word about Lady Anne's freedom with you, I will come and drag you out of whatever hole you're cowering in, and the Duke of Norfolk will bite your bollocks off. I do hope that's clear, my lord.
Yes, it's quite clear. I don't want them bitten off.
So that was Thomas speaking there?
That was Thomas doing the threatening, yes. Yeah. It was.
Oh, okay.
So that's, I just thought it was extremely, that's kind of the force that's in the situation that we're up against, and it needs to be reminded. Obviously not as well, they're not as good an actor as Mark Rylance, but it's got a lot of power purely because he's so quietly but clearly spoken with a lot of intention about these things. And I just thought these I know we've talked about it a lot, but this is obviously the part of that chain of the control of people. We know where your debts are, and me and my mates, we can rip your life to pieces. And it's that force, that sort of combined force from the international usurers that we're dealing with all the time, and which is why usury has to go. But this is how it manifests in this particular way. So I'm assuming that Henry Percy probably from that point forward kept his mouth shut and retained his bollocks, which is probably the wisest thing that he could have done. But I just wanted to sort of throw that in there. Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, earlier I was talking about the Joseph Nazi in the Battle of Lepanto. That was later than I thought. It's actually 1570.
Yep.
And it was to create a trade route between the Ottoman Empire and Venice.
Right.
At the time. So it has something to do with usury in that sense, because the merchant ships, like he mentioned there, those were the people that were the usurers that would come and collect their debts, the debts from the paper that they would create a loan for someone, and then basically you have your debt. The instrument of usury is debt. It's the interest paid on a loan.
Yes.
And that's all it is. It's nothing more or less than theft, people's hard-earned labor, and that's what we're facing right now. It's like, what are we going to do about it? That's is a good question, Paul. What are we going to do about it? What behavior
pattern could we enter into is the one that we could enter into that has not been entered into before, that has not been identified, or that has been identified but wasn't fully executed properly, that would win through. And because I played that clip because that is the attitude at the heart of the beast that you face. They will kill anything that comes near it. They'll kill it. And they have the power to do it. And I know I've droned on about this before, but when I was in court 25 years ago, that was the sense I got after about half a day of being in there, even though it was something absurd in comparison to what I've just played you in terms of it was ridiculous and minute. But it was as if you were actually about to crush their testicles. That's the way no one's doing that to us. There was this sense of an extremely aggressive hostility towards anything that's going to tamper with their ultimate control mechanism, which is their private ownership of the central bank of this nation and of yours and of the whole of Europe and elsewhere where this nonsense goes on. So how do you combat it? You can't combat it, it seems, by forming a political party. I mean, if you do, you're going to have to employ a lot of violence. A lot. You're going to have to be willing to do that.
You have to return to the moral order.
Yeah.
Because at the heart of it is, just there with Henry VIII, it tells you that it was a moral problem that he was dealing with. Divorcing his wife and then beheading the original wife, Catherine of Aragon, which would have been a blessing to both Spain and England and the rest of Europe if it had continued on. But he was stubborn and clung to that notion that he's in charge. No one's going to be the boss of him. This Pope isn't going to tell him what to do. And that's sort of the problem. You can't get a coalition if you can't follow the moral order to begin with. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Patrick. I didn't mean to bite in, but what I was going to say is our enemy has the best propaganda that our money can buy. And this is what we're up against. Really, really good propaganda. And that's what won World War II. Well, sorry, I don't think the word is won. That's how the Allies beat the Axis in World War II, because our propaganda was better than their propaganda. It's as simple as that. Far superior. And what do you do against this massive propaganda?
You create 5 times the amount of propaganda and go after
it. You do. We have to create more. And how could we create it? I mean, we can't create it using channels and avenues that they've set up, even though we've got Rumble and we've got these places to do it. And this is a really tiny show in comparison to some of these huge figures that are achieved. But the bigger the figures that you get in the alternative space, the more mainstream the message. It's more of, to me, it's more of that shock, fear porn news, we're all going to die type stuff. Okay, fine. So we're all going to die. Now, between now and then, anybody want to try and do something constructive? On for it. But what? That's the thing that I keep coming back to. What is it that hasn't been done or that succeeded even momentarily? And part of the problem, because it's such a seasoned field of decay that we're operating in. I think that's generally wherever you look, you find rottenness everywhere. The law's shot. You know, the other week we were talking about common law, weren't we? And I was out with some people last night talking about it. And again, coming back to this very simple point about the supreme, I think this is a correct use of the word, the supreme power of trial by jury. Because not only is the crime or the accused being viewed by the jury, but the very law itself on which the individual has been brought before them is also under review. And like I said, if they say that this law is complete crap, it's been designed to confer privilege on people like usury has, yeah? I mean, wouldn't the first case, you know, if I were able to convene one, or we were, or whatever, that you say the first case is the people versus the banks, which, and I'm paraphrasing Lord Acton, you know, the great challenge that's come down, the great conflict that's come down through the ages and which must be answered is the people versus the banks. And of course, we're not going to hear it on mainstream media ever, because that's an aspect of the bank. And we're not going to hear it anywhere. We're not going to hear it from the political class, because even those that know about it forget about it, because they're dealing with the drama of the day. And that's all it ever is. It's the drama of the day. And they're horrific dramas as well. I'm not trying to make light of them, but they're still fundamentally not on target. We have no idea of knowing how things should operate until we get trial by jury back and we completely annihilate usury. It's got to be a capital crime. It's got to be the penalty's got to be so heavy for it. You go, no, you're going to get destroyed, or you've got to pay whatever you've ripped people off for. You've got to pay 10 times back.
Yeah,
what?
Well, it is.
You know,
It's what's called a sin that cries to heaven for vengeance.
It does.
We would have to say
it does. So can we get heaven down here? We get the heaven police for? It's knowing where we get the power from and what and how we define that power. How do we define the type of power? You know, a bit like there, Cromwell was educating Percy about the fact Percy's thinking, well, all the power's in armies and forts. No, it isn't. Just like we were talking about with the Crusades. You're not sending any knights down there if they ain't got enough money. I don't know if I'd mentioned, these guys sold their family farms and everything so they could send their sons down, and they disappeared for 2 years and came back with nothing, and they lost everything they got, but they wanted to do it. So that you need some resources to act, and it's this, the entire sort of everywhere we look. And if we translate it, of course, to how people are living today, we get the symptom chat. We're part of it, and we have to be. Like, the symptoms are council tax is going up. What do I do about it? Oh, apparently nothing. Why? You haven't got any power. They're going to start making cars go at 20 miles an hour. What do I do about it? Nothing. You haven't got any power. This continually, again and again and again.
Yes,
and they feed it in, and we're in a drama, a communications drama, which we have to play a role in. And yet I'm looking at this going, this is still horseshit that we're involved with. How do we take ourselves away from this momentarily and with ever greater amounts of time to say this is a line of behavior that we have to enter into? And it's a combination of things. And then you go, oh, wow, there's so much to communicate. How am I going to hold the guy's attention? And then we've got to get this into a 2-minute TikTok video, which we do. It seems to me we've got to do that to some degree.
We need to mortify ourselves and get ourselves disciplined to accept suffering, because it's going to entail suffering. It already is a thing.
It is.
It's like parasite. Only harms you enough so that you don't react, because then it can feed off the host. If it were to just kill it right away, then what good is that? It's like, why would you kill your donkey if it's serving you? So
it's right, but the trouble is that these usury scammers, they can pay anybody off. They've got so much of our money that they've stolen
that's where
from
we need
us.
A moral code to follow,
that's
because
it. And you'd
otherwise we're paid off.
Bounty hunters to go out and bring them back. That's the only way. Not police or anything like that. Bounty hunters. And they've got to be brought back alive. That's the thing.
I just think if you think about doing that, Eric, it's not that I disagree with you, but if you really start to fine tune it down about what that would actually look like tomorrow morning, for example, what it would look like, we're so outgunned that that's not an option at the moment.
Well,
I don't think it's even an option.
It's the marriage of the state, which the state is, just face it, the state is the militia. The state is the militia power. It's the marriage of church and state. Just like the Crusades, you had that perfect marriage where you could actually accomplish something, where you had the moral code up, and it's upheld by the militia, by the state. And that's where it comes down to, and it's not fearing what men can do to you at a certain point. You almost have to have the martyr's attitude, like the early martyrs that led to these crusades, and their ability to stand up for what's right and just, and to set an example to other people is more than anything, because they were the ones that set the example. Hey, this person's willing to suffer and die so that you could be free and not have to worship idols of these rich and powerful people, because they don't like it when you don't offer incense to their idols. And it's the same today as it was back then.
It's no different. It's absolutely not any different. I completely agree. You know, we've mentioned before, human nature down through the millennia doesn't change. We're dealing with the same problem that Caesar was dealing with when he went back to Rome and wanted to sort things out for the common people. He got stabbed to death 50 times. That's Caesar. I'm not Caesar. He was pretty cool, apparently, with armies and things. Kicked shit out the Gauls, right? And all this kind of stuff. Not nice stuff. So these are guys that are used to bloodshed, used to killing people directly, personally themselves, and ordering other men to kill people. They still get wiped out. It's something as... Is there a way to deal with it? I mean, it's just, you think, oh, it's been going on so long, no one's really cracked it. And like we've pointed out before, when a nation has done it, like Libya, most recently, Gaddafi's now dead and they blew it to bits. And obviously last century, we think of National Socialist Germany.
Well, you still have the tribute to it from back in the Middle Ages. You have all these cathedrals. You talk about England and its glory days. You go back to it. That's where you had it. Those times when you didn't have usury. And it was a matter of returning to God and his law versus man's law, and whatever man says, the statutes of the state, whatever they are, a moral things that they make us do and uphold.
Yeah.
You know, like police. If we didn't have police enforcing usury, we wouldn't have it. But that's the consequence. You can't bring it to court. Like you said, we need a trial and a jury to try the people who are involved in this and do it in a just manner so that you have people that willing to do that, to enforce it.
Are you talking about, Patrick, the 300 years, give or take, between Longshanks, Edward I, and Cromwell, when that we didn't have usury?
Yeah, well, even before then, but yeah, roughly about that time, because that's what Henry VIII and the Protestant Reformation got rid of the indulgences, where you would have a field, a landowner with a field, and then you had a shepherd, and the shepherd needs a place to feed his sheep, and he would go to the landlord and say, "Lord, I'll pray for your soul. Let me graze my sheep." And that was the deal. It was based on that type of transaction where it benefited both parties, and the money was kept out of the hands of bankers and money. The money changer role. You have to have the sovereign, who is a moral person, being in the money changer role, and that way.
Guys, do you want to carry on talking for a bit longer? Keep the show running for a bit on this topic?
Sure.
Because we're just coming up to the end of our time slot here on WBN, so I'm just going to sign out with a little song here. And I thought I was going to call it a day at this time, but I'm not. I'm actually on for pushing this through because I think we've hit a good little patch here. I don't know how long we'll run for, but we're going to carry on running. So thank you for listening to us here on WBN. You want to carry on listening to the show and the conversation, head on over to paulenglishlive.com and click, I guess, the Rumble link or the SOAPBOX links or whatever you want if you want to listen to it. But Rumble is the place online where we've got a lot of chat. We've got a lot of people in the chat, and I'm going to go over there and look at it after the break. Here's a little song called The Magic Piper of Love by Edwyn Collins from a few years ago. It's about 3.5 minutes long. We'll be back with you after this. Yes, Edwin Collins and the Magic Piper of Love. And these are the magic communicators of Hour 3. Welcome back, Paul, Patrick, and Eric. And we were talking there just before we were pleasantly interrupted by a very wonderful pop song, if you like wonderful pop songs, but it's pretty good, I guess, about how do we deal with this? What sort of behaviour should we enter into to deal with it? And, it's a combination of looking at the return of trial by jury and dealing with the usury class, and what kind of consumer pressure group situation needs to be created to do that. Or should it be something else? It's a...
I'm going to say it's a return to Christianity that's going to save it. But and an example is actually Russia, because look at what the Bolshevik Revolution did to the destruction of Christianity in Russia. But then they could never really destroy it because it's with the people. And then the rebuilding afterward, I don't think they like it. And that's why you have people like Starmer going after Russia, because they don't like the fact that the Christians have a voice in the government there. Whether you like Putin or not, or you think it's a contrived thing where the bankers are playing both sides, which they are, I'm not arguing against that. But the fact is, in Russia, there's an upholding of the moral code and the moral law, and I see it here in America, the hatred of Russia as a consequence. You have open sodomy being promoted here to school children, and it's those type of people that are on the Ukrainian side in this war, as they call it. It's not really a war in the classical term, I don't think, but it is a moral battle going on, and you have to take sides. It's not something you can just sit back and say, well, let's let who are the powers that be handle it. You got to be able to step in, and you've got a wisdom there, Paul, with this idea of the usury. And showcasing it, because that's at the root of the society crumbling, because you can't do things. Your labor is taxed to the point where you become a slave to somebody else, and you can't ever get out of debt as a consequence. Yep. And if you can't get out of debt, you're not free.
Yeah, I think most of us around the microphones here know this. Many other people know it. Working people are completely hamstrung by it, know that something is wrong, don't know about it technically. We don't really need a technical pitch. We do need, you see, the Christian thing is charged and requires its work as well, because, in terms of talking about Magna Carta and trial by jury, these are things that are founded out of common law. And common law was around a long time before Magna Carta was formulated. Of course, this is viewed rightly as a pivotal point. You see, the laws of, and I've actually found a thing called the Magna Charta Society in certain things, and a proper translation of it. And I think we'll do a show on it pretty soon, just on that one document. But that for hundreds of years prior to that, over here, these laws this way of behaving was the natural law. And one of the interesting things as well about trial by jury, and this comes down to the force that is required to correct unlawful behavior. That's what we're talking about. We're saying that usury contravenes one of the prime laws of God, one of the laws of nature. It creates, as we are all witnessing, a totally dysfunctional society, held down. We've kind of held it all together because of technological advances, and bankers turn up and say, oh, well, we're responsible for all that because we funded it. No, everything that's been achieved has been in spite of usury, in spite of political control, in spite of so-called political leadership. It's all been done with that in opposition to us. They lay claim to it. Oh, we did all that. They're always quick to step in and seek all the glory. And whenever things go wrong, it's always the peasants. This continual sort of bending of the narrative away from the truth, which they have to do because the truth is going to hurt them bad if we can get it out there, which it needs to. So the basis of Magna Carta and the basis of trial by jury is based on sound principles of Christian law. This is why I say, if people think of Christianity as a law and a way of life that comes out of that law, we're off. The other interesting thing, I was with some people last night as well. Even the word, this word stuff, we've got law, L-A-W, and we've got law, L-O-R-E. And we're really referring to it as law, which is the law is like the myth, the ancient story of the people, which is a gathering of our natural behavior. And going over to juries and trial by jury, it says you would be tried, if you were a defendant, you will be tried by a jury of your peers. And the word peers is really important because, for example, let's try and just do a sort of comic book explanation of it. If you're a car mechanic and you've been accused of doing faulty maintenance on a car, I'm just trying to pick something up. The jury of your peers would have to be other car mechanics. Yeah. They're the only people who know whether you've been up to it or not. That's what it means. So,
someone with knowledge.
I mean, yes, someone who is in that line of work who you go, this is exactly what it is. So that's the tradition of behavior. Common law is the received behavioral application of God's law as we've applied it in pragmatic living. That's what it means. This is how you do it, right? What does it mean to be charitable? It means this. This is how the English did it. The French did it slightly different, or whatever. It doesn't matter. You've got to do it your way within your tribe. And if it's law, it will work. And of course, LAW, as I understand it, stands for these, and we were talking about this last night with a guy that I'd love to get on the show at some point as I get to know him a bit better. It's addressing the division of law. So law is law. It's one thing, and it's all in there, and it's in the Bible for those that can read it right, which is made more difficult by the fact that they keep translating it wrong, and of course the power structures of churches, blah, blah, blah. But we know all about this, right? But at its core, initial intent, that's what it's about. But LAW has split the law into these three dominions: land for the L, A for air, and W for water. This is where you get the admiralty law and the law of the land and the law of the water and the law of the air. And then they create all these divisions.
I see where you're going. You're kind of doing what do they call it? The esoteric?
Well, it is, but what we were talking, and this is fantastic last night, really good, kind of several steps away in this field from where my knowledge is. I don't know all this stuff yet. But this thing to do, and England's pivotal in this. It's absolutely pivotal, particularly to do with that period of history around Magna Carta, 1215. There were crusades going on at the same time, right?
Yeah,
and
it was toward the end of it.
Yeah, you've got feudalism. We have feudalism as the structure, the lord and all that, and you're working as a peasant on the land and all these other things, which got and then we've got the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. And once you start filling in your history, suddenly you see the line that you're in right now. You're in it. We're in exactly the same line. It hasn't changed one bit. It's exactly the same thing. And this sort of situation with Magna Carta is that, and this came out yesterday, the Inns of Court, which we know of as like Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, I've forgotten the name, there's four of them. They were formed about 1220. To begin to control, they ended up controlling these three divisions of law: land, air, and water, which is a way of getting more control and complexity into it. Why do you need a barrister? In fact, someone was given the definition of the word barrister. It comes from I can't remember what it is. It means to lie out of your mouth. That's literally what it means. It's from some French words or Flemish words. I'll have to go back on all of this kind of stuff. So the whole of the language in front of us, as many people now know, is a double-meaninged language intentionally. And the King James I Bible and Shakespeare play a role in this amplification of the English language because, courtesy of Shakespeare and other people at the time, they introduced something like an extra 20 to 30,000 words into language, many of which then take on this complex understanding. And you're talking about minds like Francis Bacon, John Dee, which we did a show on him, didn't we? Well, not much of a show, but the
you did a show a while ago. That was one of your first shows.
It was 007. It was the seventh show. That's why we did it, because that was his handle as he went around all these. So there's something about this period of history, which they call the Dark Ages. There's nothing dark about it at all. We have to illuminate it if we want to get back to trial by jury, because that's 1215. Here we are, 2024, 810 years. They've been hammering away to knock that thing out of orbit, because it says quite clearly that it is in perpetuity. That is the law. Tony Blair, for example, cannot turn around like he did and said, oh, this thing is no longer a treasonable offence. What he just did was treason. and he needed to be arraigned before a common law court and tried by his peers. Oh, that's really worrying, isn't it? When you think about them, we don't, the definition of who actually forms the jury. But that's what's out of order. All these multiple decisions that we are enduring at the tail end of the chain of command, they're all bent. I know I'm only stating the bleeding obvious, but I'm just stating it to look at how it is to be corrected. And yes, I am saying that, XO. Shakespeare and others added an awful lot of words. Shakespeare probably being Edward de Vere, and others. I think there's possibly
it was the
probably
media of the day. Shakespeare.
Yeah.
You
was.
talk about ability to communicate to large crowds of people.
I mean, I guess we got to look at who his contemporaries were and what was going on with plays at the time. But the theme of stories and all these other things that we take for granted, they're laid down in Shakespeare. I know people find it difficult because the language is a barrier. It is. There's no two ways about it. Yeah. It's very difficult at times.
But I see where you're getting at it, though. It is the communication to masses of people, because you would have a theater and then you would have an audience.
And that's how you'd introduce the new words. You introduce them through that. Yeah, people hear them and go, what does that mean? And, we take words for granted, don't we, all the time? So your assumed understanding of a word, the court works on that. And what's the Roman thing? I'm paraphrasing.
And behavior.
Let those who will be fooled be fooled.
Sorry.
Well, that's us. That's us. We are fooled all the time. I don't want it to get too fine detail on this stuff, because I'm not properly knowledgeable on this at all.
It's the words and then the response to the words that you're acting out, because in a play you're showing behavior and you're talking. It's kind of the whole deal with Hollywood and its effect on the war effort back in World War II when it was young.
Yeah.
You had this ability of mass communication to reach lots of people, and a lot of ignorant people, for that matter. Not everybody was an intelligent person watching these things, getting whipped up to go to war. A lot of them were just naive and believing, these people are evil. We need to kill them at all costs.
Of course. The demonization of the opposition out of nothing. Suddenly everybody hated Germans because, as Eric has pointed out,
the willing.
Yeah, the propaganda stepped up. It happens almost overnight, yeah.
Yeah, it did. But the thing is, the other thing that's overlooked is that the suicide rate of men of military age went through the roof in 1939. And the newspapers were printing lists and lists and lists of poor souls that had committed suicide. Because remember, the First World War had only been over 20 years prior, and they knew what was going to happen. That's something that's been swept under the, shall we say, the historical carpet. You don't hear about that. Do you remember when Dennis was on, Dennis Wise, I think one of the first shows, or maybe, I don't know when it was, we ended up talking about John Dee and the Spanish Armada, or Armadas. There are more than one. I think Dennis says there's 3. I think last time I spoke to him, he even suggested there might be 4. It's difficult to know with this stuff because everything's tampered with to such a degree. Dee is probably a pivotal figure in much of this. I mean, this is a guy who ended up becoming the court magician to Elizabeth I, who is the daughter of Henry VIII, and her mother was Anne Boleyn, who was just referenced in that clip about 15, 20 minutes ago. Anne Boleyn, of course, she did get her head chopped off. I don't know why at the moment. I probably do, but we don't want to go there. We can do head chopping off another time. But Dee is in Mortlake, near Barnes and Mortlake, in a district of London. This is in the 1500s, along with, I forgot the name, is it Kelly or something, his assistant? And legend has it that he summoned a demon in some way. His private library was 36,000 books in 1500 and odd. Do you know anybody in your life alive now who's got their own private library of 36,000 books? Maybe Lord Toffeeno's up the road. Or maybe Lord Fockham's got that amount of books, I suppose, in the Fockham Hall Library. Probably way more than that. But just looking back at that time and the expense of a book, books were extremely expensive. They're hand-built, right? Although there would have been, obviously, some printing press work by then. When's Gutenberg?
crack it. Was it 1400s Gutenberg? I can't remember now. But this is a big array of knowledge. And one of the theories floating around, this is all it is just, I'm speculating here, spitballing as they say, is that whatever D summoned has been, there's something in league with these islands, or something bad. I think there is. I think Churchill was part of that. He was a druid. There's something dark at a certain aspect of it. We've got the Fire of London in 1666. You've got Sabotage V and the Sabbateans hanging around London at the time. The Sabbateans and Worldwide Jewry were having a big discussion at the time about who was the new Messiah, because they definitely had one. I've seen Messiahs, mate, and you're definitely one, you know. I'm going back to that thing. And the choice was between Sabotage V from Smyrna, who'd created the Sabbatean cult or subset, and Oliver Cromwell. How about that? Not a lot of people know that, but it's true. And after they burnt London down, and it was obviously an organised event. It didn't happen in just Pudding Lane or whatever it is. There were people around there setting fire to things. It gave them the opportunity, how convenient, to rebuild the city along Masonic design lines, and all the plans for it were ready practically the next day. They were just, we just happen to have some plans that it's a bit like Blue Peter. Well, here's a few plans that we prepared earlier, and we can crack on with it. I'm just throwing a line up and down from here.
Paul, you reminded me with John Dee. I had been reading a week or so ago about him, just by chance, because I was looking up the material of obsidian and how they used it back in the day to make knives and mirrors. It's volcanic obsidian rock.
Yeah, what color is obsidian? Is it dark?
Black.
Very
Black.
dark. Black.
Pitch
Jet black, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And apparently Cortez, who was the conquistador that defeated the Aztecs, right? The ones, involved in ritual murder and all that kind of thing. He had given an obsidian mirror to John Dee at a certain point. So I just thought I'd throw that in there because, the occult type stuff that he was involved with, and then the stuff going on here in Mexico with the ritual human sacrifices. There's something fishy to the whole story that went on there. I don't know enough about it to be able to put it together.
There is, and also there is something very fishy, and the relationship between England and Rome is ancient. There are all sorts of other additional pieces. Yeah, because I don't know who they sent here first, the Church of Rome, to turn England Christian.
Well, it goes back to the Druids, and Julius Caesar wrote about it in his book.
He did. Well, I can't remember when there was someone came here, whenever it was, and he said, I can't turn them into Christians because they already are. And the first church in the world was down in Glastonbury in 35 AD. I've got a book on my shelf called St. Paul in Britain. It's amazing. Written by a Reverend somebody or other in 1842 or something like that, right? I've shown it to Christian people. Of course, they all laugh and go, this is complete rubbish. I go, yeah, all right. But to me, these things, there's no smoke without fire. And that story is of the disciples coming here after Christ's death and coming down to Glastonbury and establishing the first church here. And the Druids didn't have a problem with it because all of the structures of law that are inherent within Scripture and what they were talking about are Druidic as well. So, although we use the word Druid and everybody goes, oh, they're evil and bad. It's like every other organization. There's evil creeps into all of them.
The oldest record is Julius Caesar talking about it.
Yeah.
And as far as I know. And as far as most people know, Julius Caesar's description of the pagan Druids, and their human sacrifices and that sort of thing, come from that description. As far as the church history, though, that's a little bit different. I'm not so much familiar with it. I've heard some of the stories, the folklore, like you were talking about with Glastonbury. I've heard some of that, and then what is it? Who is it? Nicodemus or one of these Pharisees that had been friends with Christ, making his way up there too. I don't exactly know, but where do these come from? Where do these stories come from? Is it local?
There's a messing up of the storylines. I think I can't tell you exactly how it's messed up, but something doesn't feel right. And I don't know if I think they're all intertwined. You know, a point here, just getting back to this thing about how do we behave to bring about this hellish a correction to this hellish situation, which it is this trial by jury stuff, because they wrote it down in 1215, but it had been going on for a long time before that. It had been going on under Alfred the Great. How do you actually deal with lawbreakers in your village? How do you deal with it?
Well, that goes back to the Old Testament, even to Moses, to like Deuteronomy, where it said you have your judges in consultation with the Levitical priesthood, the priests of the tribe of Levi. They would consult each other and be informed, because you would have people who knew the law that could apply it, with using the judges being the military police force, more or less, in consultation with that priesthood that knew the scriptures, knew the commandments, and then could apply them, and they informed each other. It was a marriage. It wasn't something where one was stronger than the other, and it's supposed to be informed by the good moral code, that if, you know, you don't kill people, you don't commit adultery, you don't steal, you don't lie.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, the knights, just hopping around a bit, the knights in these crusades, they were sinners big time. Oh boy. And they knew it. And half of them went down for absolution of their sins for repentance purposes. They'd done, you know, these were really tough, hairy lads. There's no two ways about it. I know we've got this picture of knights in their shining armour being full of chivalry. It's not always like that.
But it also shows you that there was commerce going on between East and West at the time.
Yeah.
And that they wanted to reestablish that. There was a desire to have that put back in place, where you could then grow civilization as a consequence of it, because they saw Christendom is good. We need to spread this. We don't need to just hide and build up our castles. We need to go and go on an adventure. And the young men, you know, they have their sponsors, like you were talking about. They have 3 horses and their servants and all their goods to go out along with them on that pilgrimage, which is interesting. You're talking about English history, and the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. Yeah. Talks about that. His role, besides being an author, was customs officer. So any goods coming into England at the time, he would be in charge of going through them for the sake of the king and making an accounting of them. And that's where all these stories come into play that he learned about, and then was able to write down. And that's why it's such an interesting story to read that Old English. You know, I don't know if it's Old English or what kind of English it is, but you start reading it in the original English, which I've done for them, right? And it's fascinating, because you see how words are formed. It's crude, but at the same time, there's a meaning to it, and you get the gist of it, even though it doesn't sound right to modern ears. Just like Shakespeare, you listen to that, people don't talk like that, but it's meant for an audience at the time.
Well, we could try. We could have a Shakespearean show. We all practice like mad.
That, good luck.
It's
good
tricky.
Luck in everyday conversation.
I know how to be completely impenetrable.
I bet Eric could do it, but I couldn't.
Yeah, Eric does it all the time. We're always hanging out at Fockham Hall having a Shakespeare chinwag.
Yes, I mean, there's a big problem we got at Fockham Hall at the moment with dogs cocking their legs up, and you know, it's a question of to pee or not to pee. That is the question.
It is. Actually, by the way, I actually took the opportunity during the last little music to do just that very thing and feel much happier for it. Nature called in a wonderful way.
By, Paul.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, the thrills of live internet broadcasting in a shed. So, yeah, no, it's what it's all about. But I mean, I think all this, although I'm zooming around a bit here, it's all relevant because the purpose of it is to track this line that we're supposed to get onto to correct this severe crime that we are having to live under. Usury is the severest of all crimes because it infects everyone with this disease. And we know from what we've talked about here on and off that all of these civilizations go down the toilet because of it, along with the emancipation of women's sexual liberation. It's a terrible thing. You can't hold it together. The center just starts to fall apart because people lose a focus for purpose. And, you know, when you look at the bills that are coming through, it's making life meaningless because no one can plan anymore. No one is planning. People will stop to plan. If you can't measure where your expenditure is going to go because the electricity bill is going to double and there's no comeback, we have no sort of consumer pressure group response. You can't do that. And if you do that, we're going to chop your balls off or whatever we're supposed to say, or you're going to court. It's this. And we've got to sort of reacquaint ourselves maybe with a litigious gene. And it's not really litigious. It's just there are crimes taking place. People are behaving dishonorably. They're breaking the moral and ethical code. Here's how they're doing it. The government are saying you will pay more for this and we will use your money to go and wage war against Russia. And we're going, these people need to be brought to court immediately and to a common law court with a trial by jury of their peers. And now we're a long way off from that. But at least getting the conversation going begins to get the images popping up into people's heads of that it should exist. And should becomes could and becomes would and becomes will. And here it is. Right, here we go. Because it's in our past. This is the wonderful thing about the history. You go, look, they used to do it like that. What went wrong? This guy turned up with a lot of money and he paid those, and that chipped away that little bit. And then 50 years later, that chipped away that little bit. And 800 years later, it's all been chipped away. And you've all lost sight of this wonderful thing that your forefathers demonstrated to you and left to you, which is when they were much more closely aligned. I'm not saying perfectly aligned by any means. I wasn't alive at the time, but much more closely aligned with the laws of God that are supposed to be carried by an organized religion that should be saying, we're the safekeepers of the law. Because if we're not safekeepers of that, we're safekeepers of nothing. There's no point having us. It's the law that protects you and enhances your life and stops usurers performing their filthy business in your village. Because if we find them, we'll bite their bollocks off, to paraphrase Thomas Cromwell. We'll send Lord Norfolk round and he'll bite your bollocks off, mate. And he does it literally. You know, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's got to be that heavy because it kills people. Usually kills people. It kills civilizations. That's what it's doing. We all know it.
Well,
how to correct the disease.
Well, whenever usury has been stopped, the country goes from bust to boom literally overnight because you're not paying out billions or trillions of money into thin air.
Yeah,
it goes back to the people.
Oh, it's interesting. You mentioned people that break away from the usury system and start their own government based on a fair wage system of value. That I was listening earlier today to the D-Day broadcast of Fibber McGee. Do you know Fibber McGee and Molly, Paul? That little broadcast.
That comedy duo, they're wonderful. It's wonderful, actually. It's a wonderful show.
But at the same time, it was propaganda for the war effort to get people involved in that. Yeah, and they, in fact, where they broadcast that from was Rockefeller 30. You know, they call it 30 Rockefeller Center. That building, the big building, and it's just interesting trying to get people revved up to go fight the evil Germans who had defeated usury and bring them back into the fold of usurious loans and that sort of thing. And the same place that they did the Fibber McGee type stuff in Rockefeller Plaza is where they have MSNBC, which is Bill Gates' operation now.
Bill.
And
nice lad. Used to give his mother flowers and that.
Yeah, exactly. And all of this stuff with with COVID and the clot shots and all of these things that they tried to push on people. It's the same group of people. When you think about it, it's the same place, same group of people pushing the propaganda out. They have the microphone, they have the megaphone, people's attention. Because most people, like you said, like Paul Biener was saying, their attention span is a TikTok video. And then they move on to something else.
How do we summon the evil spirit of Sefton Delmer? Eric, and get him to work on our side. Yeah, Sefton Delmer was Black Ops for British propaganda during World War II.
Oh, yes.
A couple of good comments here in the chat. Exo votes for forceful lobotomizing. I don't know how forceful it is, really. If you set up a lobotomization centre and you can get the lobotomies, is that what they would be called, to turn up and be lobotomized, I guess we might have a thing going there.
I've got a question. Eric, have you heard of Charlie and his orchestra?
Yes.
Oh,
because I heard that from thanks to Paul. Because it was
a few weeks
couple of weeks ago. I'd never heard of it before then. And, I'm
okay.
absolutely hooked on it. I think they're bloody good,
Well,
Charlie and his orchestra.
Absolutely. From my end, shout out to Maleficus, who actually brought that to my attention a couple of years back. So, Maleficus, that's a biggie. Yeah, they're fantastic. And there's a whole sort of catalogue of music that needs to be completely AI'd and cleaned up and audio enhanced. It would be just amazing. And we get round to that at some point. All the toys are out there to do all this stuff and to really make things sparkle in a way that they probably haven't sparkled for many a year. But that's a question here as well from Alvin Kurt. How do you normally deal with a parasite infestation? Do you starve it? Do you introduce something that is toxic to it? I don't know. It's a very good question because that's what we've got. Usury is parasitism. But there's no two ways about it.
We're fighting ignorance because you ask anybody in the street what usury is, they shrug their shoulders, they haven't got a clue. Even people who you think are educated, they don't know what usury is. And once you start to explain it, their eyes go up in the sky and they just couldn't give a monkeys. It's down to us to get them to give those monkeys up, Eric. I want their monkeys. We've got to. If it's not down to us, who's it down to? I mean, I'm just trying to say, I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. I'm going to do certain things. I pretty much know how my day's going to go, but it won't be right. I'll get to the end of the day and going, there's something I should be doing that's going to make a much bigger impact with regards to all of this that I'm currently doing. I'm not trying to beat myself up. I'm just saying you need to get to the end of every day and go, I could have done better, because it's always true and it's a motivator for tomorrow. So that's really, The big problem, though, is people are, it's true what George Carlin said, and I don't want to sound smug by saying this, but people are stupid. And I can almost guarantee that they will have to do a false flag to get this country involved in a war. And it'll be the most probably ridiculous false flag you'd ever think of. And there was a chappie talking the other day, I can't remember his name, and he was saying that Ukrainians have got drones which will go 1,000 miles. So from Ukraine, they could hit London, they could get anywhere virtually in Europe. And all they have to do is paint it in Russian colours and say that it's from Russia. And suddenly, and people would believe it. And they could even say it's got a nuclear, a chemical warhead on it. So we'll all have to have the jab to protect ourselves from these terrible chemicals that don't exist.
You're missing your calling, Eric. You need to be working in the Ministry of Propaganda, sir. Probably a good salary. How many drones do you think the British military have got?
Oh, we've got some really good ones. Just look at what happened.
I bet they've got loads. I bet the
Ah.
British military have got bloody loads. I don't think we can buy anything that they say about anything. Nothing. Not a thing. Drone warfare invalidates aircraft carriers. They're finished. Aircraft carriers over. You can build 10,000 drones for 50 quid, and that's it. What are you going to do with that? It's changed the whole nature of how they deal with this stuff. So, but I mean, you're right. Maybe they will do it. I mean, I was just thinking then when you were talking about a false flag operation. So maybe they'll have a Cossack running around the car park at the Houses of Parliament, letting all the tyres down. Evil Russians. Letting down the tyres, burning cars. Look at him. And he'd be all cackling with a big beard. And he'll have those boots on that you've been talking about, Patrick, those big Russian boots. And he'll be dancing. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, let's really ham it up. I mean,
it reminds me of the Three Stooges you were talking about. Zelensky threatening when J.D. Vance, you'll feel the pressure, our pressure. You'll feel it. You'll feel it.
Yeah.
It's a threat. It's like getting people all riled up and angry.
Yep.
Godfrey Bloom. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Patrick.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, but Godfrey Bloom, he is an ex-military bloke. It's quite interesting. I don't agree with all what he says, but he is interesting. And he said that nowadays in the Navy, there's submarines and everything else as a target. And that's it. He said the days of aircraft carriers and ships are gone, because all you need is some drones and that's it. You've lost them. So he said it's pointless. And he reckons that some of these extremist groups, they could actually sink an American aircraft carrier with ease now. It can be done.
Oh yeah, the whole hypersonic missiles and torpedoes and that cavitation torpedoes, they could just easily do that kind of thing. There's no need for aircraft carriers anymore.
Maybe the People's Defence, bringing things right round full circle against drones, is to form crossbow gangs. We just take them out with crossbows, right? You go, it's all back.
Well,
that's what you do.
They're starting up because whenever you see, some time ago, there was a picture of a cat with a crossbow bolt through its head. And what they would do, they always show animals and that. I think, they've taken all the other weapons away from us. And I think the crossbows are the next on the list. But what they don't realise is that they can be made. You can make them with guns. Well, yes, but they'll be very, very difficult. But with crossbows, they are, I wouldn't say they're simple to make, but anybody that's good at DIY could knock one up with ease.
Yeah.
And there's a chat that shows you how to make one just using a Stanley knife, the minimum of tools.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe we do a show on how to make your own crossbow. We'll have to do a video for that. Right, if you've got a bit of sticky back plastic and some rubber bands.
The thing of it is, though, is it really necessary? Is it ever going to, because I think we can accomplish a lot with just talking. That's the thing.
I think we have to. I think we. Me too. I think we have to accomplish it all with talking. And structured talking. And I think, coming back to what you were saying, Eric, about people being ignorant of things, it's not surprising that they are. The question, you can talk yourself into doing nothing here. It's very easy. You just say, oh, well, they'll never be able to work it out anyway. I think this is down to the teachers. I think they can. I'm serious. I actually, we're not talking about something complicated, but we're talking about a field where whenever it has been talked about, it's been talked about by experts who do talk about it in a complicated way, which makes it inaccessible to the layman. That's why I was talking about this. Writing for the layman is the highest form of writing. I mean it. I'm not mucking about. If you can't get things across simply and easily, you're failing at what you're doing. If you look at copywriters that write advertising, they really know how to use words to get things across quick and so that you understand it. One of the things that I looked at years ago, one of the things that's brilliant is comic books for teaching complicated mechanical tasks. I think in the US military, they used to have them. Many things, you're having to train maintenance engineers and stuff like that to take engines apart. No, they used it over here. It's a brilliant medium. You just have a character talking and you just explode things through a series of illustrated still pictures, which gives the reader time to absorb each one at their own speed. You can teach really complicated stuff. What we require even before that, it seems to me, maybe is to get that fire burning in people. Some kind of mild but really serious alarm has to be sounded inside every frame, every individual body. They have to go, there's something, they know that there's something wrong, and it's introducing them to the room just off to the left that they never noticed before. They say, there's a meeting taking place there in 3 minutes. Do you want to come in? Only last 10 minutes. It'd be great. Yeah, all right. Come in. Free cup of coffee. That sort of stuff. It's that sort of stuff.
It's spot on. And also it has to be, I think, although I haven't got much time for Gandhi, peaceful, completely civil disobedience. Peaceful civil disobedience. That is really what is necessary.
Don't they have a monument?
Violence goes nowhere. It never has proved anything. It never will prove anything.
Isn't there a Gandhi monument at Westminster?
There may be.
Parliament?
Probably is.
Yeah, there may be. Yeah,
there
may well be.
They generally have a lot of traitors there, monuments to them. But the thing is that this idea that we've got that we need a leader, that is the other thing. We see we've been like sheep schooled to believe that we look for a leader. No, if you want to look for a
You
leader,
gotta
look
be
in the
it.
mirror.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to be it. Yeah. I mean, you look at, I'm probably repeating myself here, and I know I am, but you look at the Boers when they fought the British. Now, the Boer War, they were South African farmers, and they didn't really have a structured rank or anything like that. They were all very much individuals, yet they pinned down the British Army, which was one of the most advanced armies in the world in those days. They actually, the British Army, it just couldn't beat them. They literally were unbeatable. Look at the Yellow Vests before they got infiltrated, almost unbeatable. This is what we need, something like that.
It's something about this movement locally. I mean, for example, you're in a meeting, Eric, and you start talking about usury, and you're talking about it because nobody else in the meeting can. In fact, they didn't even know what the word was until you brought it up. That kind of situation. Yeah. Now, at that moment, you're leading the conversation. I think leadership, you see, is an event. It's not really. I've always thought it's an event. I think it naturally happens. It's happened here when one of us has been leading the conversation with whatever topic or field we want to take it into. It's important, and when you're working in a useful space where people are able to listen, we would call it, say, microphone discipline round here in this particular situation. It works. When you go too far with certain individuals, it doesn't. I don't think the idea is too complicated. I've boiled it down at the moment to the fact is you live in a nation, yeah, you have a government, yeah, you do working and spending and tax paying and dying here, right? Yeah. Why do you not own the bank of your nation? Why would I need to do that? To stop someone else owning it. Because someone else does own it, and they own it to their advantage and to your colossal disadvantage. And that's breaking the law. And we've got to find, even that's not good enough. I accept that. But it's drilling down into really simple things. I actually did get a lot of traction when I would say to people, do you own shares in the Bank of England? And they would have a quizzical look come across their face, which is good. And they go, can you own shares in the Bank of England? I said, well, some people can, but not people like you and me. Don't you think that's a bit weird?
Well,
a bit
like
queer?
The highways in Palestine, you have the Palestinian highway, and it's segregated from the Jewish highway. And it's no coincidence that in Tel Aviv they've got a Rothschild Avenue. Yeah, so it's the same group of people you have ruling over you there, making the same type of rules, excluding you. You're essentially Palestinians in your own country.
Then shouldn't we be making rules? Could we make rules that excludes them? Actually, those rules have already been made. It's just that they've been breached. So, I mean, I was asking those questions purely, to just begin to get people to think of the sentences. It's literally that basic. It's no wonder people believe what they believe when you look at what they consume down the television, right? So there's no point even blaming people. We're talking about they're all going to be idiots. Yeah, so what? That's what you've got. That's how it is. It's like this now. That's who we have to work with. And also, each of us, in a process like this, are going to get embarrassed when we trip up, because it's going to happen. And it just will. And somebody bright is going to come into the room at a particular point of conversation, at a particular aspect. And you've got to always be humble enough to go, what do you... Right, this guy's in charge for the next 15 minutes because we're talking about this. And you have to sit back and you've got to be in a student. It's that. That stuff doesn't happen in politics because it's a matured, permanent position nonsense.
They don't
I do this. I never get it wrong.
Like the Zelensky and Trump thing. Nobody's admitting that they're wrong.
They're all right.
They're all right. And,
and it's worthless.
Getting in the way.
Absolutely. It is. And it's a key part of human makeup. Nobody likes to be witnessed to be an arsehole.
No one
but
wants
you're going to be.
Fool.
Yeah, no one wants to be, but guess what? You're going to be. And once you get used to it, you go, hey, it's not too bad. No, it's all right. And particularly if you're with a forgiving... What happens is, once it happens in a group situation, everybody else knows that they're possibly in line for an embarrassing moment too. So they will treat
That's
people...
where your peers need to be
and they
good
will treat people who are exposed in that way in a kindly and more compassionate way because, hey, it could be me next. It probably will be. But don't worry, we're not going to give you it in the neck either because now we've all admitted that we're all, a sandwich short of a picnic. And we are, all of us. We're all, I mean, if we weren't, you wouldn't get up tomorrow morning and go, I know everything and I can't be bothered to do anything now. I don't want to do that because I know everything. Well, you're never going to get to that point, thankfully. It's never going to be like that.
I think the most awake time, and I don't like using that word awake, was after the First World War because people knew about usury then and knew all about it. And this country was literally on the tilt, almost was going to be a revolution, almost. And that's where propaganda came into play. And I can see the similar things happening in this country again. But it won't be the same as after the First World War because there was lots of associations, veterans associations, that were militant. And of course you had a lot of young men that were military trained. And you could buy firearms over the table, virtually the same as you can buy in some states in America today.
Yeah,
we're in a different situation.
And then the way they get at those groups, Eric, is they corrupt them morally.
Correct. And they infiltrated. And not only that, they're using the same things like there's going to be a spiritual awakening. That was all invented by the Secret Service. And this is going to happen. They're using exactly the same techniques. Very clever. Very, very clever. But simple in the other way. But no, they infiltrated the militant groups and destroyed them from within. And that's what they do today. This is what they do with most of these groups.
Well, I think talking about, you're right, I think talking about the local resources is important. Like I mentioned, I went for a walk the other day. Did I mention this last week? I don't know. There's a church yard, where I walk, and I went in and I sat down in the church for about, maybe I mentioned this last week, but it's worth mentioning again. I sat down for
it's good.
10 or 15 minutes. It was great. And I was passing it again the other day. I didn't go in this time. I didn't need to, but they've got a big scout hut there, and they've got a fantastic parish hall. And when I walked past it the other day, I thought, oh, there's a good courthouse. I'm just, why not? Why can't so many things be tried locally by local juries and people be involved in these things? Of course, you've then got the challenge of how do we find the jurors? Is there going to be jury rigging? Is somebody going to try and rig juries?
It's going to be your neighbor.
Yep.
Ultimately, it's going to be somebody that it should be your neighbor, someone who knows you, knows what you're up to, and can judge one way or the other about what you're doing. But what you're talking about, I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to do here. Is I have my neighbor down the road from here. We've been meeting at his house for Bible study and catechism every Wednesday, and it's just recently we got permission to go to our parish and start it there instead of at his private house. We have it at the church so that then we can get more people involved. Get more people in learning the morality and the scripture, and learning proper behavior, learning about things like usury, because that's how you're going to be able to present it. This isn't something we're just coming up because we're pissed off about some bank that we didn't get along with. No, this is a historical precedent that's been along since the dawning of man. You had Cain and Abel. One was jealous of the other, and that's they thought they should have the glory, and that's kind of what it boils down to with money and that kind of thing. It's like one person wants it all. They want all the glory. They want all the treats in life.
Well,
and
they do.
To hell with everybody.
We got
else.
3 minutes left, lads. By the way, to talk because we're going to hard end at 11. Bang on.
Okay. But very quickly, I had to leaflet through my post because there's local elections soon. Anybody heard of the British Democratic Party? Now, this is new, and I looked through it. It's about immigration, and I recognise some faces there. I think it's an offshoot of the BNP, the old BNP. I think that people started another party.
What's it called again, Eric?
The British Democratic Party.
British
yes.
Democrats.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm familiar with them. Is it Eric Luthwaite who
That's
is
it.
the head
That's
of
it.
those?
Yeah. Do you know much more about? I mean, I don't know much about them.
No,
Am I right?
I don't.
Are they BNP? Are they?
I think some of them must be. Yeah, there must be all sorts of overspill with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's difficult to say. If I know Nick Griffin now is completely closed off, rightly so, I think, to the idea that there's a political solution in terms of political parties. I agree with that. But maybe political parties could be useful, not in terms of the fact that they're going to get elected on these things. I don't think that that's the case. But if they become much more sophisticated in terms of their communication pitch to highlight these things, I'm still more interested in things like consumer pressure groups, because it sounds softer, and it is. And it's gentler, which it is. Of course, the worry is it going to move quick enough? But it is about, if we are classed as consumers, which is how they, useless eaters. Okay, fair enough. Like that. Oh, you really hurt my feelings, you fat arseholes. That's the way I think about it. It's like, oh, that's good. Oh, aren't you rude? It's so funny. They sit around thinking of terms for all this kind of stuff. Pathetic little gits. But I think softly spoken stuff is the way to go.
I agree with you.
And with kindliness and warmth, but with that barb in it of truth, because it will feel like a barb. And, Mark Rylance did a pretty good thing there as Thomas Cromwell. It was pretty heavy what he was saying to that guy, but he said it in a very polite and clear and measured way, and that's what makes it so effective. That is what makes it effective.
I think they have to act as signposts where people, how can I explain it? It's a bit like Tribes of the Jungle. What they do now, where there's these tribes that don't realise that there's other humans around, they let the tribe discover them. They don't walk into the tribe. They've got to, and I think we got to let people discover for themselves. Let them discover. We'll just give them enough information for them to discover these things themselves. Because I mean, I was speaking to a girl once who I was talking to her about modern history, and you could tell as I was talking to her, the penny was dropping. So I didn't go too heavy. I just backed off a little bit, and suddenly, this was the truth group that I used to go to. Suddenly, she came along. She said, "You're right. I've been looking it up." So sometimes it happens like that, but it's best not to go too heavy. You just act as a signpost all the time. You're just pointing people in the direction, just keeping it light all the time.
I think there's something happens that goes where it bursts out of all of this earnest ground laying work.
Yeah.
Because whilst you're in this process, you're looking around and there's still the same people for years and years. You're thinking that we're not going anywhere. And it's often the case that people don't go anywhere. But there can occur, and it does occur, that suddenly, for whatever reason, 3 or 4 extra people come along one week, and another 10 the week after that, and there's nothing, then another 8, and suddenly it's of a different size. And when it gets to a different size, the communication challenges change, and the power of the group goes up exponentially all the time, because what's being generated is subconscious agreement for something. People will walk into the room and won't even know what you're talking about, but because a lot of other people are in there, and there's an energy, a certain type of intensity about it, the thing begins to motor and go. Of course, ultimately, I suppose these things often get out of hand, without serious levels of control. And that's when you'll get your infiltrators in public spaces. So knowing how to structure that is difficult. But then again, I have no idea what other option we've got. We want to speak to our fellow man, because we actually need them if we are to get back to a place of decency, and we believe, rightly, that they will be positively changed by this as well. And so you really don't have too much other choice. The thing has got to get to a certain scale, it seems to me, to have power. And when it does, it comes along with all sorts of other additional sorts of little problems and issues and things like this. So we've got about a minute left to chat, lads. I'm going to play the song in about a minute. So any little closing words for this week? I'm hoping to be far less coffee next week, but you never can tell. But I really enjoyed tonight, actually. Tremendous stuff.
Thanks for inviting me on. Very kind.
Yeah, good show, Paul.
Yeah, good.
Cool.
I've really enjoyed tonight. It's excellent. I mean, I've found a lot. my knowledge of the Crusades has increased because I knew absolutely zilch about them.
Me too.
Thank you.
Me too. I'm sure we can get more detailed about it, but it's relevant to now. Do we need another crusade? Well, we need the true Crusader spirit, which is an honourable thing. You will think that if you read that book. It's an honourable thing. They did it.
Martyr.
It is. It's the spirit of saying, my people really count, and without them, I'm nothing, and therefore I'm prepared to do this. Under these arrangements, this has to be done if we are to have a future. And we've got a lot of crusading actions to fight. We've got to fight against the usurers. We need the restoration of true law under the ordinance of God. And we need these things. And when it gets clear with people, they go, why were we not using these things in the first place? Well, we fell asleep on them. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for putting up with my slightly coffee approach this week. And I'm glad we did go on for 3 hours. I wasn't so sure we were going to do that. We will, of course, be back again next week at the same time. And if I dig up some more stuff, and lads and lasses, I'll keep you informed ahead of time. We maybe take a more of a dive into Magna Carta and these sorts of things, because I think they're relevant. They are being offered back to us, and we need to pick them up, dust them off, and look at how we can apply them to get Keir Starmer to not turn up for work anymore. Just bugger off, will you? And all your mates too. You're not wanted, you're no good, and you know it. So, and we'll see if there's any more episodes of the Three Stooges. Anyway, keep well, everybody. Thanks, everyone in the chat. We'll be back again same day next week. Bye for now.